The Miami skyline glittered in the late afternoon sun, a forest of steel and glass reaching towards the heavens. At its heart stood the Lancaster Consortium building, a 50-story behemoth that seemed to touch the clouds. Its sleek, modern design was a testament to the wealth and power of the Johnson family, who had built their empire from the ground up over 3 generations. At the base of the tower, a state-of-the-art fountain danced, its waters leaping and twirling in a mesmerizing display. The sound of rushing water mingled with the steady hum of the city, creating a soothing background noise that belied the tension building within the building's topmost floor. Michael Johnson stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his corner office, his lean frame silhouetted against the panoramic view of the city he'd grown to dominate. At 38, he was the majority shareholder of the Lancaster Consortium, a position he'd fought tooth and nail to achieve. His salt-and-pepper hair and piercing blue eyes gave him an air of authority that commanded respect in boardrooms across the country. As he gazed out at the city, Michael's mind raced. The weight of expectation and responsibility sat heavily on his shoulders, a burden he'd carried for as long as he could remember. He'd always known that the family legacy would fall to him, but he'd never imagined it would come with such an impossible condition. His eyes flickered to the antique desk behind him, where a single envelope lay, its contents threatening to upend everything he'd worked for. The handwritten letter from his dying grandfather, Arthur Johnson, had arrived that morning, carrying with it a bombshell that had shaken Michael to his core. With a deep breath, Michael turned from the window and picked up the letter once more, his eyes scanning the elegant script as if hoping the words might have changed since he'd last read them. "My dear Michael," the letter began, "as I near the end of my journey, I find myself reflecting on the true meaning of success. The empire we've built is impressive, but what good is a legacy without love to share it? It is with this in mind that I've made a decision that I hope will guide you towards the happiness that has eluded you for so long." Michael's jaw clenched as he read the next paragraph, the one that had turned his world upside down. "Therefore, I have added a clause to my will. To inherit the family fortune and maintain your position as majority shareholder of Lancaster Consortium, you must be married to a woman you truly love before the company's 50th anniversary celebration next week. If you fail to meet this condition, your shares will be divided among the board members and the family fortune will be donated to charity." The paper crinkled in Michael's grip as he fought to control his rising panic. A week. He had a week to find a wife he truly loved, or he'd lose everything he'd spent his life building. He paced the office, his mind racing through possibilities. He'd never allowed himself the luxury of love, viewing it as a distraction from his ambitions. Now, that single-minded focus threatened to be his undoing. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, Michael's assistant, Sarah, knocked on the door. "Mr. Johnson? The board members are waiting in the conference room for your briefing on the upcoming gala." Michael straightened his tie, schooling his features into a mask of calm confidence. "Thank you, Sarah. I'll be right there." As he walked towards the conference room, Michael's mind churned with possibilities. The gala, of course. It was a charity event, set to take place in just 3 days. It would be the perfect opportunity to meet someone, anyone, who might be willing to help him out of this predicament. The faces of the board members turned towards him as he entered the room, their expressions a mix of respect and curiosity. Michael took his place at the head of the table, pushing his personal troubles aside as he focused on the task at hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and authoritative. "As you know, we're hosting our annual charity gala this Friday. This year, we're expanding our focus to include local community initiatives. I believe it's time for Lancaster Consortium to show that we're not just about big business, we care about the little guy too." As Michael outlined the plans for the gala, a part of his mind continued to grapple with his grandfather's ultimatum. He needed a plan, and he needed one fast. The gala would be his best chance to find someone suitable, someone who could play the part of a loving wife convincingly enough to satisfy his grandfather's conditions. But even as he formulated this plan, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered doubts. Was this really what his grandfather wanted? To trick him into a loveless marriage for the sake of the inheritance? There had to be more to it, some lesson or insight that Arthur Johnson wanted his grandson to grasp. As the meeting concluded and the board members filed out, Michael remained seated, lost in thought. The sun had fully set now, and the city lights twinkled beyond the windows, a sea of possibilities stretching out before him. He thought back to his grandfather's words about the true meaning of success. For the first time in years, Michael allowed himself to consider what his life might look like if it wasn't solely focused on the next deal, the next acquisition. What would it be like to have someone to share his triumphs and failures with? Someone who saw him as more than just the hard-nosed businessman he'd become. With a sigh, Michael stood and gathered his things. As he left the office, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the polished elevator doors. The man staring back at him looked tired, burdened by more than just the weight of his responsibilities. 1 week, he muttered to himself as the elevator began its descent. 1 week to find love or lose everything. As he stepped out into the warm Miami night, Michael felt a strange mix of dread and anticipation. The next 7 days would change his life, one way or another. Little did he know that fate, in the form of a passionate young woman named Samantha Davis, was about to throw him a curveball that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, success, and what truly matters in life. The stage was set, the players were moving into position, and the clock was ticking. Michael Johnson's journey from ruthless tycoon to a man capable of love was about to begin, and it promised to be a transformation that would keep Miami talking for years to come. The following morning, Miami awoke to a symphony of urban sounds, car horns blaring, construction crews beginning their day's work, and the distant roar of waves crashing against the shoreline. In his penthouse apartment, Michael Johnson stirred restlessly, his sleep having been fitful and plagued by dreams of ticking clocks and disappearing fortunes. As the first rays of sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Michael sat up in bed, his mind already racing with the impossible task that lay before him. He reached for his grandfather's letter on the nightstand, rereading it for what felt like the 100th time. The words seemed to mock him now, a challenge that threatened everything he'd built. To inherit the family fortune and maintain your position as majority shareholder of Lancaster Consortium, you must be married to a woman you truly love before the company's 50th anniversary celebration next week. Michael ran a hand through his disheveled hair, feeling the weight of his grandfather's expectations bearing down on him. Arthur Johnson had always been a force to be reckoned with, a man who built an empire from nothing and expected nothing less than excellence from his descendants. But this was madness. As he showered and dressed for the day, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his grandfather's ultimatum than met the eye. Arthur had always been a shrewd businessman, yes, but he was also a man who valued family and connection. Perhaps this was his way of forcing Michael to confront the emptiness in his personal life. The smell of freshly brewed coffee greeted Michael as he entered his sleek, modern kitchen. His housekeeper, Maria, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, was already bustling about, preparing his usual breakfast. "Good morning, Mr. Johnson," she said with a warm smile. "You look troubled. Is everything all right?" Michael hesitated, unused to sharing his personal concerns with others, but something in Maria's motherly gaze made him pause. "It's complicated, Maria. Family matters." Maria nodded understandingly. "Family can be the source of our greatest joys and our deepest troubles. But remember, Mr. Johnson, family is also where we find our strength." Her words struck a chord within Michael, reminding him of the legacy he was fighting to preserve. He managed a small smile. "Thank you, Maria. I'll keep that in mind." As he sipped his coffee and nibbled on toast, Michael's mind whirred with potential plans. The charity gala was still his best shot at finding someone who could help him meet his grandfather's conditions. But how could he possibly forge a genuine connection in such a short time? The drive to the office was a blur of city streets and honking horns. As Michael navigated through the morning traffic, he found himself paying more attention to the couples he saw on the sidewalks, holding hands, sharing laughs, stealing quick kisses. Had he really been missing out on all of this in his relentless pursuit of success? Upon arriving at the Lancaster Consortium building, Michael was immediately swept up in the day-to-day operations of running a multi-billion-dollar company. But even as he attended meetings and made crucial decisions, a part of his mind remained fixated on his looming deadline. During a brief lull between appointments, Michael found himself drawn to the large family portrait hanging in his office. It depicted 3 generations of Johnsons: his grandfather Arthur, his father James, and himself as a young boy. The sight of his younger self, eyes bright with promise and ambition, made Michael's chest tighten with an unfamiliar emotion. What would that young boy think of the man he'd become? Successful, yes, but at what cost? The empire he'd helped build now stood on the brink of slipping through his fingers, all because he'd neglected the one aspect of life his grandfather clearly valued above all else: love. A knock at the door interrupted his musings. Sarah, his assistant, entered with a stack of papers. "Mr. Johnson, I have the final guest list for the charity gala. Would you like to review it?" Michael nodded, grateful for the distraction. As he scanned the names, a plan began to form in his mind. "Sarah, I need you to do some research for me. Find out everything you can about the attendees, their backgrounds, interests, relationship statuses, especially focus on any single women who might be compatible with my interests." Sarah raised an eyebrow, but knew better than to question her boss's unusual request. "Of course, Mr. Johnson. I'll have that information for you by this afternoon." As she left, Michael turned back to the window, his gaze sweeping over the city he'd come to dominate. The thought of losing it all made his stomach churn. But even more unsettling was the realization that, should he fail, he'd be left with nothing but an empty life and missed opportunities. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. Michael threw himself into work with renewed vigor, as if by sheer force of will he could make his problems disappear. But as the sun began to set, painting the Miami skyline in hues of orange and pink, the reality of his situation came crashing back. Sarah knocked on his door once more, this time bearing a thick folder. "I've compiled the information you requested, Mr. Johnson. Is there anything else you need?" Michael shook his head, already reaching for the folder. "No, thank you, Sarah. You can go home for the day." Left alone in his office, Michael began to pore over the profiles Sarah had prepared. Name after name, face after face, all potential solutions to his predicament. But as he studied each dossier, he couldn't shake the feeling that this approach was all wrong. How could he possibly manufacture a genuine connection in such a calculated manner? As the night wore on, Michael found himself once again standing before the family portrait. His grandfather's eyes seemed to bore into him, challenging him to be more than just a successful businessman, to be a man worthy of the Johnson legacy. With a heavy sigh, Michael turned away from the portrait and gathered his things. As he rode the elevator down to the parking garage, he made a decision. He would attend the charity gala as planned, but he wouldn't go with the intention of finding a wife. Instead, he would open himself up to the possibility of a genuine connection, whatever form that might take. As he drove home through the quiet streets of nighttime Miami, Michael felt a strange sense of calm settle over him. He had no idea what the coming days would bring, but for the first time in years, he felt ready to face the unknown. Little did Michael know that fate, in the form of a passionate young woman named Samantha Davis, was already setting the stage for a meeting that would change both their lives forever. As he drifted off to sleep that night, The ticking clock of his grandfather's ultimatum seemed just a little less daunting, and the future a little brighter with possibility. The pieces were falling into place, the players moving towards their destined encounters. Michael Johnson's journey of self-discovery and unexpected love was about to take its first tentative steps, promising a story that would captivate hearts and minds across Miami and beyond. The day of the Lancaster Consortium's charity gala arrived with a palpable buzz of excitement in the air. Miami's elite were preparing for an evening of glamour, philanthropy, and networking, but for Michael Johnson, the event held a far more personal significance. As the first light of dawn crept through his penthouse windows, Michael found himself already awake, his mind racing with possibilities and anxieties. He stood before his floor-to-ceiling mirror, adjusting his perfectly tailored tuxedo, and took a deep breath. The man staring back at him looked every inch the successful business tycoon, but beneath the polished exterior, doubts and fears churned. "You can do this, Michael," he muttered to himself, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just be open, be genuine. Remember what's at stake." The weight of his grandfather's letter seemed to press down on him, a constant reminder of the impossible task before him: find true love in a week or lose everything. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on Michael, but he knew his grandfather well enough to understand that this was no joke. As he made his way down to the lobby of his building, Michael's phone buzzed with a message from Sarah, his ever-efficient assistant. "Mr. Johnson, everything is set for tonight's gala. The guest list has been finalized and all arrangements are in place. Good luck." Michael smiled wryly at the good luck. If only Sarah knew just how much luck he needed tonight. The sleek black limousine was waiting for him outside, its polished surface reflecting the vibrant colors of Miami's sunset. As the car glided through the city streets, Michael found himself paying more attention to the couples walking hand in hand along the sidewalks, the families enjoying early dinners at sidewalk cafes, the young lovers stealing kisses in the fading light. Had he really been blind to all this for so long? The venue for the gala, the Grand Palmetto Hotel, loomed ahead, its Art Deco facade illuminated by strategically placed spotlights. A red carpet stretched from the curb to the entrance, already crowded with Miami's most influential figures. As Michael stepped out of the limo, camera flashes exploded around him. He plastered on his most charming smile, the one that had graced countless magazine covers and business publications, but tonight it felt hollow. A mask he'd worn for so long, he'd almost forgotten what lay beneath. "Mr. Johnson, over here." "Michael, a word for the Miami Herald. Is it true that Lancaster Consortium is expanding into green energy?" The barrage of questions followed him as he made his way down the red carpet. Michael answered with practiced ease, his responses polite but non-committal. His mind was elsewhere, scanning the faces in the crowd, wondering if his future, his salvation, might be among them. Inside the grand ballroom, the gala was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the gathering, their light reflecting off the sequined gowns and polished cufflinks of Miami's elite. A string quartet played softly in one corner, providing a refined backdrop to the hum of conversation. Michael made his way through the crowd, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries, his eyes constantly roving for what? He wasn't even sure anymore. A spark, a connection, the woman who could save his empire with a rushed trip down the aisle. "Michael, darling," a familiar voice cut through his thoughts. Vivian Hartley, a longtime family friend and notorious socialite, air-kissed his cheeks. "You look positively dashing tonight, but why so tense? This is a party, after all." Michael forced a smile. "Just a lot on my mind, Vivian. Business never sleeps, you know," Vivian tisked, wagging a bejeweled finger at him. "All work and no play makes Michael a dull boy. You know, my niece Clarissa is here tonight. She's just back from Europe and dying to meet you." For a moment, Michael was tempted. Clarissa Hartley was beautiful, well-connected, and came from a good family. In another time, he might have seen her as the perfect solution to his current predicament, but something held him back. Maybe later. Vivian, I should make the rounds, greet the other guests. As he moved away, Michael caught sight of his reflection in one of the ballroom's gilded mirrors. The man looking back at him seemed lost, out of place in this glittering crowd. Was this really what his life had become? Schmoozing at galas, looking for a wife like he was shopping for a new car. He made his way to the bar, ordering a scotch neat. As he waited for his drink, he overheard a heated conversation nearby. I'm telling you, it's a lost cause. The board has already decided that community center doesn't stand a chance against a new luxury condo development. Michael's ears perked up. He turned slightly, catching sight of two men in expensive suits, their heads bent close in conversation. It's a shame, really? The second man replied. I hear that place does a lot of good for the neighborhood. But business is business, right? Something about their callous dismissal of the community center struck a chord with Michael. Wasn't this exactly the kind of thing his grandfather had always railed against? The pursuit of profit at the expense of people. As he mulled over these thoughts, a commotion near the entrance caught his attention. A young woman was arguing with one of the security guards, her voice rising above the gentle murmur of the gala. I'm telling you, I'm supposed to be here. Check the list again. Michael found himself drawn to the disturbance. Curiosity piqued. As he approached, he got his first clear look at the woman and felt something shift inside him. She was striking, but not in the polished, artificial way of so many women at the gala. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple bun, a few strands escaping to frame her face. Her dress, while elegant, lacked the ostentatious glitz of those around her. But it was her eyes that captured Michael's attention, fierce, determined, and blazing with passion. Is there a problem here? Michael asked, stepping forward. The security guard turned, recognizing him immediately. Mr. Johnson, sir. This young lady insists she's on the guest list, but I can't find her name. The woman turned those intense eyes on Michael, and he felt a jolt of something, recognition, attraction. He couldn't quite place it. I'm Samantha Davis, she said, her voice strong and clear. I'm here representing the Sunnyside Community Center. We were told we'd have a chance to speak about our cause tonight. Michael's mind raced. The community center. Wasn't that what those men at the bar had been discussing? He made a split-second decision. It's all right, he told the guard. Ms. Davis is my guest. There must have been a mix-up with the list. Relief and gratitude flooded Samantha's face, quickly replaced by determination. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I appreciate your help. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a center to save. As she moved past him into the ballroom, Michael felt a strange urge to follow her, to learn more about this passionate young woman and her cause. For the first time since receiving his grandfather's letter, he felt a glimmer of genuine interest, of possibility. Little did Michael know that this chance encounter would set in motion a chain of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about love, success, and what truly mattered in life. As he watched Samantha disappear into the crowd, he couldn't shake the feeling that his world was about to change in ways he could never have anticipated. The gala continued around him, a swirl of glitz and glamour, but Michael's focus had shifted. In Samantha Davis, he sensed a kindred spirit, someone who might just hold the key to not only saving his inheritance, but also rediscovering the parts of himself he'd lost in his relentless pursuit of success. As he made his way back into the crowd, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. The night was young, and for the first time in years, he felt truly alive with anticipation. Whatever happened next, he knew one thing for certain. His life would never be the same after tonight. The grand ballroom of the Grand Palmetto Hotel buzzed with the chatter of Miami's elite, but Michael Johnson found himself oddly detached from the glittering spectacle. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching for the determined young woman who had captured his attention mere moments ago. Samantha Davis, with her fierce gaze and unwavering resolve, had stirred something within him that he couldn't quite name. As he navigated through the sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos, Michael's mind raced. The clock was ticking on his grandfather's ultimatum, yet here he was, intrigued by a woman who seemed to care little for the trappings of wealth that surrounded them. It was a stark departure from his usual world, and he found it both unsettling and exhilarating. Finally, he spotted her near the stage, deep in conversation with a small group of people. Even from a distance, Michael could see the passion in her gestures, the way she leaned in, her words clearly impassioned. He approached slowly, not wanting to interrupt, but eager to hear what she was saying. "And that's why the Sunnyside Community Center is so vital," Samantha was saying, her voice carrying a note of urgency. "It's not just a building, it's the heart of our neighborhood. It provides after-school programs for kids, job training for adults, and a safe space for everyone in between. We can't let it be torn down for another luxury condo complex that nobody in the area can afford." Michael felt a pang of guilt. How many times had he signed off on projects that displaced communities without a second thought? But watching Samantha, seeing the fire in her eyes as she fought for her cause, he began to see things from a different perspective. As the small group dispersed, Michael seized his opportunity. "Miss Davis," he said, stepping forward, "I couldn't help but overhear. Your passion for this community center is admirable." Samantha turned, surprise flickering across her face before it settled into a guarded expression. "Mr. Johnson, I appreciate you helping me get in, but if you're here to tell me that business is business and there's nothing to be done, I'm afraid you're wasting your time." Michael held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "Actually, I was hoping you could tell me more about the center. It seems I may have been misinformed about its importance to the community." Samantha's eyes narrowed, studying him intently. Michael felt as if she could see right through his carefully constructed facade, down to the uncertainty that had been plaguing him since his grandfather's letter arrived. After a moment, she nodded. "All right, Mr. Johnson, but I warn you, once you hear about Sunnyside, you might just find yourself on our side." For the next hour, as the gala swirled around them, Michael listened intently as Samantha painted a vivid picture of the Sunnyside Community Center and the neighborhood it served. She spoke of single mothers who relied on the center's daycare to be able to work, of at-risk teens who found mentorship and direction through its programs, of elderly residents who found companionship in its social clubs. As she talked, Michael found himself drawn in not just by the story she was telling, but by Samantha herself. Her brown eyes sparkled with determination, her hands moving animatedly as she described the center's impact. He realized with a start that he hadn't been this engaged in a conversation in years. "So you see, Mr. Johnson," Samantha concluded, "Sunnyside isn't just a building, it's a lifeline for hundreds of people. Losing it would devastate the entire community." Michael nodded slowly, his mind racing. "I had no idea," he admitted. "The reports I've seen, they didn't capture any of this." Samantha's expression softened slightly. "That's because the people making those reports never bothered to actually visit Sunnyside, to talk to the people whose lives would be upended. They just see numbers on a spreadsheet, not the human cost." Her words hit Michael like a physical blow. How many times had he been guilty of the same thing, looking at spreadsheets and profit margins instead of considering the real-world impact of his decisions? "Ms. Davis," he said, his voice low and intense, "I want to help. Tell me what I can do." Surprise flashed across Samantha's face, quickly replaced by suspicion. "Why?" she asked bluntly. "Why would Michael Johnson, CEO of Lancaster Consortium, want to help save a rundown community center in a neighborhood he's probably never even visited?" Michael hesitated. How could he explain the turmoil of the past few days, the soul-searching brought on by his grandfather's letter? How could he make her understand that her passion had awakened something in him, a desire to be more than just a successful businessman? "Because," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. I think I've lost sight of what's really important. Your dedication to Sunnyside, the way you fight for your community. It's made me realize that there's more to success than just profit margins and stock prices. Samantha studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded. All right, Mr. Johnson, if you're serious about helping, here's what we need. As Samantha outlined her plan to save Sunnyside, Michael found himself increasingly drawn in. Her strategic thinking, her ability to rally support, her unwavering commitment to her cause, it was all deeply impressive. And as they talked, formulating a plan of action, Michael felt a spark of something he hadn't experienced in years, genuine excitement. The gala continued around them, but Michael and Samantha remained in their own world, huddled together at a small table, scribbling notes and bouncing ideas off each other. As the night wore on, Michael found himself laughing more than he had in years, energized by Samantha's quick wit and sharp intellect. It wasn't until the band began to play their final set that Michael realized how much time had passed. He glanced at his watch, surprised to see it was well past midnight. Ms. Davis, he said, a note of regret in his voice, I'm afraid the gala is coming to an end, but I don't want our conversation to end here. Would you be willing to meet again, perhaps tomorrow? I'd like to visit Sunnyside, see it for myself. Samantha looked surprised, but pleased. Yes, I'd like that. But Mr. Johnson, I have to ask, why are you really doing this? What's changed? Michael paused, considering his words carefully. Let's just say I've been given a wake-up call recently. Your passion, your commitment to your community. It's reminded me of the values my grandfather tried to instill in me. Values I'm afraid I've neglected for too long. Samantha nodded slowly, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Well, Mr. Johnson, I look forward to seeing if you're as good as your word. Shall we say 10 a.m. at Sunnyside? It's a date, Michael replied, then quickly corrected himself. I mean an appointment. A meeting, Samantha laughed, a warm, genuine sound that made Michael's heart skip a beat. A meeting it is, Mr. Johnson. I'll see you tomorrow. As they parted ways, Michael watched Samantha disappear into the thinning crowd. His mind was whirling with plans and possibilities, but one thought stood out above the rest. For the first time since receiving his grandfather's letter, he felt like he was on the right path. Little did Michael know that this chance encounter with Samantha Davis was just the beginning. As he made his way home that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was about to change in ways he could never have anticipated. The ticking clock of his grandfather's ultimatum seemed less daunting now, overshadowed by the excitement of this new challenge. As he drifted off to sleep that night, Michael's dreams were filled not with boardrooms and business deals, but with warm brown eyes and the promise of a new beginning. Tomorrow would bring a visit to Sunnyside, and with it, the next chapter in a story that was rapidly becoming more than just a quest to secure his inheritance. It was becoming a journey of rediscovery, of remembering the man he once wanted to be. The stage was set for a transformative adventure, one that would challenge Michael's perceptions, test his resolve, and potentially lead him to the one thing he never knew he was missing: true love. The morning sun cast long shadows across Miami streets as Michael Johnson's sleek black SUV wound its way through the city. The polished skyscrapers of the financial district gradually gave way to more modest buildings, the manicured lawns replaced by small, well-tended gardens. Michael found himself paying closer attention to his surroundings than he had in years, seeing the city through new eyes. As he neared his destination, Michael couldn't help but feel a mix of anticipation and nervousness. The events of the previous night's gala still felt somewhat surreal. Had he really spent hours engrossed in conversation with Samantha Davis, planning ways to save a community center he'd never even heard of before yesterday? It seemed so far removed from his usual world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. The GPS announced his arrival, and Michael pulled up in front of a weathered brick building. A faded sign proclaimed it as the Sunnyside Community Center. The paint was peeling in places, and the small parking lot was riddled with potholes, but there was an undeniable warmth to the place. Colorful murals adorned one wall, depicting scenes of community and togetherness. As Michael stepped out of his car, adjusting his tie, he'd opted for business casual today, but still felt overdressed. He caught sight of a familiar figure waiting by the entrance. Samantha Davis stood with her arms crossed, watching his approach with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Mr. Johnson," she called out as he neared, "I have to admit, I half expected you not to show." Michael felt a twinge of guilt at her words. How many times had he made empty promises to people like Samantha, only to forget them in the rush of business? "Mrs. Davis," he replied, extending his hand, "I assure you, when I make a commitment, I follow through." Samantha shook his hand, her grip firm and assured. "Well then, let's see if we can open your eyes to what Sunnyside really means to this community." As they entered the building, Michael was immediately struck by the buzz of activity. Despite the early hour, the center was already alive with people. A group of elderly men and women were gathered in one corner, engrossed in a lively game of chess. In another room, he could see young children being dropped off for what appeared to be a daycare program. "This is our main area," Samantha explained, gesturing around them. "It serves multiple purposes throughout the day. Right now, it's our senior social club and early morning childcare. Later, it'll host after-school programs, job training workshops, and community meetings." Michael nodded, taking it all in. The space was well used, every corner serving a purpose. But he also couldn't help but notice the signs of wear and tear, the scuffed floors, the mismatched furniture, the flickering fluorescent lights. "It's not much to look at," Samantha admitted, noting his gaze. "But it's the heart of this neighborhood. For many people here, it's the only place they have to turn to." As they continued their tour, Michael found himself increasingly impressed by the scope of services Sunnyside provided. They passed a small library filled with donated books, a computer lab where adults were learning basic digital skills, and a kitchen where volunteers were preparing meals for a local food bank. "Ms. Davis," Michael said, pausing in front of a bulletin board covered in flyers for various programs. "I had no idea places like this still existed. The range of services you provide, it's remarkable." Samantha's eyes lit up with pride. "This is what community looks like, Mr. Johnson. It's not about fancy buildings or state-of-the-art facilities. It's about people coming together to support each other, to lift each other up." As they walked, Michael found himself drawn into conversation with various community members. He met Maria, a single mother who relied on Sunnyside's childcare to be able to work. He talked with Jake, a teenager who credited the center's mentorship program with keeping him off the streets and on track for college. Each story added another layer to his understanding of Sunnyside's importance. "Do you see, Mr. Johnson," Samantha said as they paused in a quiet corner, "this isn't just about saving a building, it's about preserving a lifeline for hundreds of people. If Sunnyside closes, where will Maria take her kids? Where will Jake go after school? What about the seniors who rely on our social programs to combat loneliness?" Michael nodded slowly, the weight of the situation settling on him. "I understand, Ms. Davis, I truly do. But the reality is, the land this center sits on is valuable. The developers who want to build here, they're not just going to walk away." Samantha's eyes flashed with determination. "Then we fight. We show them that the true value of this land isn't in how many luxury condos can be squeezed onto it, but in the lives it transforms every day." Her passion was contagious, and Michael found himself nodding along. "All right, Ms. Davis. You've convinced me. Now, let's talk strategy. How do we save Sunnyside?" For the next hour, they huddled in Samantha's small office, brainstorming ideas. Michael was impressed by Samantha's strategic thinking and her deep understanding of community organizing. Together, They began to formulate a plan that combined Michael's business acumen with Samantha's grassroots approach. As they worked, Michael couldn't help but notice the little things about Samantha, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was deep in thought, the sparkle in her eyes when she got excited about an idea. He found himself more engaged and energized than he had been in years. Their planning session was interrupted by a knock on the door. An elderly woman poked her head in, her face creased with worry. "Samantha, dear, I hate to bother you, but we've got a problem with the roof again. That leak in the main room is back, and it's worse than ever." Samantha's face fell. "Oh no, not again. I'll be right there, Mrs. Henderson." She turned to Michael with an apologetic smile. "Duty calls. Would you like to see firsthand one of the many challenges we face here at Sunnyside?" Michael nodded, following Samantha out to the main room. Sure enough, a steady drip of water was falling from the ceiling, forming a growing puddle on the floor. Community members were scrambling to move furniture and place buckets to catch the water. "This is what we're up against, Mr. Johnson," Samantha said, her voice tinged with frustration. "Phew, we spend so much time and money on band-aid fixes like this. We can barely keep our programs running, let alone expand to meet the growing needs of our community." As Michael watched Samantha roll up her sleeves and join in the efforts to mitigate the damage, something shifted inside him. This wasn't just about fulfilling his grandfather's conditions anymore. It wasn't even about the challenge of saving Sunnyside. It was about doing what was right, about using his resources and influence to make a real difference in people's lives. "Ms. Davis," he said, his voice filled with newfound determination, "I think I have an idea, but it's going to take some unconventional thinking and a lot of hard work. Are you up for it?" Samantha turned to him, a mix of hope and skepticism in her eyes. "Mr. Johnson, if it means saving Sunnyside, I'm up for anything." As they stood there, surrounded by the bustling activity of the community center, Michael felt a sense of purpose he hadn't experienced in years. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, convincing his board, negotiating with developers, rallying community support. But for the first time in a long time, he felt truly alive. Little did Michael know that this day at Sunnyside was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about success, community, and love. As he and Samantha began to outline their ambitious plan, the ticking clock of his grandfather's ultimatum faded into the background, replaced by the exciting possibility of not just saving a community center, but rediscovering the man he was meant to be. The stage was set for a transformative adventure, one that would test Michael's resolve, challenge his perceptions, and potentially lead him to the one thing he never knew he was missing, a love born of shared purpose and mutual respect. As they worked side by side, neither Michael nor Samantha realized that they were taking the first steps on a path that would change both their lives forever. The following days saw Michael Johnson's world turned upside down. The polished boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations of Lancaster Consortium seemed a world away, as he found himself increasingly drawn into the vibrant, chaotic ecosystem of Sunnyside Community Center. Each morning, he'd arrive at the center, his crisp suits gradually giving way to more casual attire as he rolled up his sleeves and dove into the work of saving this vital community resource. Samantha Davis, for her part, watched Michael's transformation with a mix of surprise and cautious optimism. She'd seen well-meaning businessmen come and go before, full of grand promises that ultimately amounted to nothing. But there was something different about Michael, a genuine passion that seemed to grow with each passing day. On this particular morning, they were huddled in Samantha's small office, surrounded by stacks of papers, financial reports, and community surveys. The wall behind them was covered in a large whiteboard, scribbled with ideas, timelines, and action plans. "Okay," Michael said, running a hand through his hair, which was looking decidedly less styled than usual. "Let's review what we've got so far. We need to raise $2 million to not only save Sunnyside from developers, but also to renovate and expand the center to meet the growing needs of the community. Samantha nodded, her brow furrowed in concentration. Right, and we've got just under 3 weeks to do it before the developer's offer expires and they start pushing for eminent domain. Michael couldn't help but feel a twinge of irony. 3 weeks. The same deadline his grandfather had given him to find a wife. But somehow, in the whirlwind of the past few days, that ultimatum had faded into the background, overshadowed by the more immediate challenge of saving Sunnyside. We've got a multi-pronged approach, Samantha continued, ticking off points on her fingers. Community fundraising events, grant applications, corporate sponsorship appeals, and she paused, looking at Michael with a mix of excitement and nervousness. Your plan to leverage Lancaster Consortium's resources. Michael nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. His plan was ambitious, perhaps even reckless from a purely business standpoint, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was the right thing to do, not just for Sunnyside, but for himself. I've called for an emergency board meeting this afternoon, he said, checking his watch. I'll present our proposal for Lancaster Consortium to not only match all funds raised for Sunnyside, but to also commit to a long-term partnership for community development in the area. Samantha's eyes widened. Michael, that's incredible. But are you sure? Won't this put your position at risk? Michael smiled wryly. If only she knew the half of it. Sometimes, Miss Davis, you have to take risks for what you believe in. I've spent too long playing it safe, focusing on profits at the expense of people. It's time for a change. As they continued to refine their strategy, Michael found himself increasingly aware of Samantha's presence. The way her eyes lit up when she talked about the community, the determined set of her jaw when faced with a challenge, the gentle touch of her hand on his arm when she got excited about an idea. He'd never met anyone quite like her, someone who could be so passionate and yet so practical, so idealistic and yet so grounded. Their planning session was interrupted by a knock on the door. Jake, the teenager Michael had met on his first visit to Sunnyside, poked his head in. "Hey, Mrs. Davis, Mr. Johnson," he said, his voice a mix of excitement and nervousness. "We've got that community meeting set up in the main room. Everyone's waiting to hear about the plan to save Sunnyside." Samantha and Michael exchanged a look. This was it, the moment they'd present their ideas to the very people whose lives would be most affected by Sunnyside's fate. As they made their way to the main room, Michael felt a flutter of nerves in his stomach. He was used to high-pressure presentations, but this felt different. These weren't shareholders or business partners. These were real people, with real lives that hung in the balance. The main room was packed, every chair filled and people lining the walls. Michael saw faces he recognized from his visits over the past few days. Maria and her children, Mrs. Henderson from the chess club, the volunteers from the food bank. All eyes turned to him and Samantha as they took their places at the front of the room. Samantha stepped forward first, her voice clear and strong. "Friends, neighbors, members of our Sunnyside family, we're here today to talk about the future of our community center. As many of you know, we're facing a serious threat from developers who want to tear down Sunnyside and build luxury condos." A murmur of anger and concern rippled through the crowd. Samantha held up her hand, and the room fell silent again. "But we're not going down without a fight. In fact, we have a plan not just to save Sunnyside, but to make it better than ever." She turned to Michael. "And we have a new ally in this fight. Many of you have met Mr. Michael Johnson over the past few days. He's here to tell you about how he and his company are going to help us save Sunnyside." As Michael stepped forward, he felt a moment of panic. What was he doing? A week ago, he'd never even heard of Sunnyside. Now he was about to pledge millions of dollars and potentially risk his entire career for this place. But then he looked out at the sea of faces before him, hopeful, worried, determined. He thought of all the stories he'd heard over the past few days, of lives changed and communities strengthened because of this humble community center. And he knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that he was exactly where he needed to be. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice growing stronger with each word. "I'm Michael Johnson, CEO of Lancaster Consortium. A week ago, I wouldn't have been able to tell you the first thing about Sunnyside Community Center. But in the past few days, I've seen firsthand the incredible work that happens here every day. I've met people whose lives have been transformed by this place. And I've come to understand that the true measure of a community isn't in the height of its buildings or the price of its real estate, but in the strength of its people and their commitment to each other." He paused, looking out at the crowd. He saw nods of agreement, looks of surprise, and more than a few skeptical faces. "That's why I'm here today, to tell you that Lancaster Consortium is committed to saving Sunnyside. We're going to match, dollar for dollar, every cent raised by this community, and we're not stopping there. We're going to work with you, with Samantha and her team, to not just save Sunnyside, but to expand it, to make it even better equipped to serve this community for generations to come." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Michael saw tears in the eyes of some community members, looks of shock and joy on others. But his eyes were drawn to Samantha, who was looking at him with a mix of admiration and something else, something that made his heart skip a beat. As the meeting continued, with Samantha outlining the details of their fundraising plan and community members stepping up to volunteer and share ideas, Michael felt a sense of purpose and belonging he'd never experienced before. This, he realized, was what his grandfather had been trying to tell him all along. Success wasn't just about making money or climbing corporate ladders. It was about making a difference, about being part of something bigger than yourself. The meeting concluded with a burst of energy and optimism. As people filed out, many stopped to shake Michael's hand or thank him for his support. But it was Samantha who approached him last, her eyes shining with a mix of gratitude and something deeper. "Michael," she said softly, using his first name for the first time, "what you're doing for Sunnyside, I don't even know how to thank you." Michael felt a warmth spread through him at her words. "You don't have to thank me, Samantha. I think I'm the one who should be grateful. You've opened my eyes to a whole new world, a new way of thinking about business and community." As they stood there, surrounded by the buzz of excited community members, Michael felt a shift in the air between them. The professional boundaries that had defined their relationship were blurring, giving way to something more personal, more profound. But before either of them could say anything more, Michael's phone buzzed insistently. He glanced at it, his heart sinking as he saw the reminder for the board meeting. "I have to go," he said reluctantly. "The board meeting. This is where the real fight begins." Samantha nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Go, do what you need to do. We'll be here, ready to keep fighting for Sunnyside." As Michael left the community center, heading back to the glossy world of Lancaster Consortium, he felt like he was straddling two worlds. But for the first time in his life, he felt truly alive, truly purposeful. Whatever challenges lay ahead, with the board, with saving Sunnyside, with his growing feelings for Samantha, he was ready to face them head-on. Little did he know that the board meeting would set in motion a chain of events that would test his resolve, challenge his newfound convictions, and force him to confront the true cost of following his heart. The journey to save Sunnyside was just beginning, and with it, Michael's journey to rediscover himself and, perhaps, just perhaps, find the love his grandfather had wished for him. The sleek elevator ascended rapidly, carrying Michael Johnson to the top floor of Lancaster Consortium's headquarters. As he watched the floor numbers tick by, he felt the weight of two worlds pressing down on him. Behind him lay Sunnyside, with its vibrant community and the promise of a new purpose. Ahead loomed the board meeting, where he would have to convince a room full of hard-nosed business people to support his radical new vision. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the hushed, carpeted hallway that led to the boardroom. Michael straightened his tie, took a deep breath, and strode forward. He could feel the eyes of employees on him as he passed, their curious glances a reminder of how much had changed in just a few short days. As he approached the boardroom, his assistant, Sarah, intercepted him. "Mr. Johnson," she said, her voice low and urgent. "The board members are already seated. There's a lot of tension in the room. Are you sure about this?" Michael met her concerned gaze with a determined smile. "More sure than I've ever been about anything, Sarah. Thank you for your concern." With that, he pushed open the heavy wooden doors and entered the boardroom. The conversation inside immediately hushed as all eyes turned to him. Around the long, polished table sat the 12 members of Lancaster Consortium's board of directors. Some faces were curious, others skeptical, and a few openly hostile. "Gentlemen, ladies," Michael said, his voice steady as he took his place at the head of the table, "thank you for agreeing to this emergency meeting. I know it's unusual, but I assure you, what I'm about to propose is of utmost importance to the future of Lancaster Consortium." He could see the board members exchanging glances, their body language a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Michael took a deep breath, channeling the passion he'd felt at Sunnyside into his words. "For years, Lancaster Consortium has been at the forefront of real estate development in Miami. We've built skyscrapers, luxury condos, and office complexes. We've made a lot of money for our shareholders, but in the process, I fear we've lost sight of something crucial: the communities we're meant to serve." A murmur rippled through the room. Michael pressed on, his voice growing stronger. "I'm here today to propose a new direction for Lancaster Consortium, one that balances profit with purpose, that sees community development not as a charitable afterthought, but as a core part of our business model." He launched into his presentation, outlining the plan he and Samantha had developed. He spoke of Sunnyside Community Center, of the lives it touched and the potential it held. He proposed not just saving the center, but using it as a model for a new kind of community-focused development across Miami. As he spoke, Michael could see the reactions around the table. Some board members leaned forward, intrigued. Others sat back, arms crossed, their expressions skeptical. And a few, he noted with a sinking feeling, looked outright angry. "What you're proposing," interrupted Richard Hawthorne, one of the oldest and most influential board members, "is a complete departure from our business model. We're a real estate development company, not a charity. How do you expect to justify this to our shareholders?" Michael had anticipated this question. "By showing them that this is not just the right thing to do, but a smart business move. The world is changing, Mr. Hawthorne. Consumers, especially younger generations, are increasingly concerned with corporate social responsibility. By positioning ourselves as leaders in community-focused development, we open up new markets, improve our public image, and create sustainable, long-term growth." Another board member, Elena Rodriguez, spoke up. "I see the potential, Michael, but the numbers, committing to match all funds raised for this community center, plus promising ongoing support. That's a significant financial commitment." Michael nodded, acknowledging her point. "It is, but I believe the return on this investment, both in terms of goodwill and future opportunities, will far outweigh the initial costs. Plus, we have the chance to transform lives, to make a real difference in our community. Isn't that worth something?" The discussion continued, growing heated at times. Michael fielded questions, addressed concerns, and passionately defended his vision. As the debate stretched on, he could feel the energy in the room shifting. Some board members were coming around to his way of thinking, while others remained staunchly opposed. Finally, after what felt like hours, Michael made his closing argument. "Ladies and gentlemen, we stand at a crossroads. We can continue down the path we've always taken, focusing solely on short-term profits. Or we can choose to be leaders, to show that a company can be both profitable and socially responsible. I'm asking you to take a leap of faith with me, to believe in a vision of business that doesn't just change skylines, but changes lives." A heavy silence fell over the room as Michael's words hung in the air. He looked around at the faces of the board members, trying to gauge their reactions. Some looked thoughtful, others uncertain. A few, he noted with a sinking feeling, still looked decidedly unconvinced. "Thank you for your presentation, Michael," said Janet Lee, the board's chairwoman. "This is certainly unexpected. We'll need time to discuss and consider your proposal. In the meantime, I think it's best if we take a short recess." As the board members filed out of the room, Michael remained at the head of the table, his mind racing. He'd given it his all, laid out his vision with all the passion and conviction he could muster, but would it be enough? He was so lost in thought that he didn't notice Janet approaching until she was right beside him. "Michael," she said, her voice low, "can I have a word with you in private?" Heart pounding, Michael followed Janet to her office. As soon as the door closed behind them, she turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "What's really going on here, Michael?" she asked. "This sudden interest in community development, this passionate plea for social responsibility, it's not like you. Is there something you're not telling us?" Michael hesitated. How could he explain the transformative journey of the past few days? How could he make Janet understand the profound shift he'd experienced without revealing the truth about his grandfather's ultimatum? "Janet," he began, choosing his words carefully, "I know this seems sudden, but the truth is, I've been doing a lot of soul-searching lately, visiting Sunnyside, seeing the impact it has on people's lives. It reminded me of why I got into this business in the first place, not just to make money, but to make a difference." Janet studied him for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "You've changed, Michael," she said finally. "I can see that. But you have to understand, what you're proposing is a massive shift for the company. Not everyone is going to be on board." Michael nodded, feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension. "I understand, but I truly believe this is the right move for Lancaster Consortium. We have the opportunity to be pioneers, to show that a company can be both profitable and socially responsible." Janet sighed, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You always were a visionary, Michael. It's one of the reasons we made you CEO, but this is your biggest gamble yet." Before Michael could respond, there was a knock at the door. Sarah, Michael's assistant, poked her head in, her expression worried. "Mr. Johnson, there's someone here to see you. She says it's urgent." Michael's heart leapt. Could it be Samantha? Had something happened at Sunnyside? "Send her in," Janet said, curiosity evident in her voice. The door opened wider, and Michael felt his blood run cold. It wasn't Samantha standing there, but a face from his past, one he hadn't seen in years. "Hello, Michael," said the woman, her voice smooth as silk. "It's been a long time." As Michael stared at the newcomer, his mind reeling, he realized that the challenge of convincing the board was just the beginning. The real test of his resolve, his newfound convictions, and perhaps even his growing feelings for Samantha, was only just beginning. The woman's presence threatened to upend everything, bringing with it echoes of Michael's past and complications he couldn't have foreseen. As he stood there, caught between Janet's scrutiny and this unexpected blast from the past, Michael knew that the path ahead had just become infinitely more complex. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not just Michael's business acumen, but the very core of who he was becoming. The journey to save Sunnyside, and perhaps his own soul, had taken an unexpected and potentially perilous turn. The air in Janet's office seemed to thicken as Michael stared at the woman standing in the doorway. Her name escaped his lips in a whisper, barely audible: Victoria. Victoria Sinclair stood before him, as poised and elegant as ever. Her tailored suit spoke of wealth and influence, while her piercing green eyes held a mixture of amusement and something darker, more challenging. She was every bit the woman Michael remembered from 5 years ago, beautiful, ambitious, and utterly ruthless. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she glanced between Michael and Janet. Janet, ever the astute businesswoman, sensed the tension immediately. "Not at all," she said smoothly, though her eyes betrayed her curiosity. "Michael, perhaps you'd like to use my office to catch up with your Friend. Michael nodded stiffly, his mind racing. What was Victoria doing here? And why now, of all times? As Janet excused herself, closing the door behind her, Michael found his voice. Victoria, he said, struggling to keep his tone neutral. This is unexpected. What brings you to Miami? Victoria's red lips curved into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Oh, Michael, she purred, moving further into the room with the grace of a cat. Is that any way to greet an old flame? Especially one who's flown all the way from New York just to see you. Michael felt a familiar tightness in his chest, a mixture of attraction and wariness that Victoria had always inspired in him. I'm sorry, but I'm in the middle of some very important business. If you'd like to schedule a meeting— Always so formal, Victoria interrupted, perching herself on the edge of Janet's desk. But then again, that's what I loved about you. So dedicated, so driven. Her eyes raked over him appreciatively. You haven't changed a bit, Michael. Still the ambitious boy I fell for all those years ago. Michael bristled at her words. A lot has changed, Victoria. I'm not the same person I was back then. Victoria's eyebrow arched elegantly. Oh, is that so? Because from what I hear, you're still very much the ruthless businessman. In fact, word on the street is that you're about to close a deal that will cement Lancaster Consortium as the top real estate developer in Miami. Michael felt a chill run down his spine. How did she know about the Sunnyside deal? And more importantly, what did she think she knew? You seem well informed, he said cautiously, but I'm afraid you're mistaken. The deal you're referring to, it's not what you think. Victoria's laugh was like tinkling glass, beautiful, but with sharp edges. Oh, Michael, don't tell me you've gone soft. The Michael I knew would never pass up an opportunity like this. Prime real estate, a neighborhood ripe for gentrification. It's a gold mine. As Victoria spoke, Michael felt a surge of emotions. Anger at her presumptions, guilt over the person he used to be, and a fierce protectiveness over Sunnyside and the new path he was forging. You're right about one thing, Victoria, he said, his voice gaining strength. I'm not the Michael you knew. I've found something more important than just making money. I'm trying to make a difference. Victoria's eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine surprise crossing her face. A difference. Michael, darling, we're not in the business of making differences. We're in the business of making money. Don't tell me you've forgotten that. Michael shook his head, a sad smile playing at his lips. That's where you're wrong. We can do both. In fact, we have a responsibility to do both. The deal you're talking about. I'm not tearing down that neighborhood. I'm saving it. For a moment, Victoria looked genuinely taken aback. Then her expression hardened. Saving it? Michael, be reasonable. Think of the profits you're throwing away. Think of your shareholders, your board. I am thinking of them, Michael interrupted. I'm thinking of the long-term benefits, both financial and social. It's a new world, Victoria. Companies can't just focus on profits anymore. We have to consider our impact on communities, on people's lives. Victoria stood, her posture stiff. I see, she said, her voice cold. Well, it seems I've wasted my time coming here. I had hoped to propose a partnership between our companies, but clearly you're no longer interested in serious business. As she moved towards the door, Michael felt a mixture of relief and regret. Victoria had been a big part of his life once, representing everything he thought he wanted: success, power, wealth. But now, thinking of Samantha and the people of Sunnyside, he realized how empty that life had been. Victoria, he called out as she reached for the door handle. She paused, looking back at him. I'm sorry if I disappointed you, but I'm not sorry for the changes I'm making. I hope one day you'll understand. Victoria's expression softened for just a moment, a flicker of the woman Michael had once loved shining through. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual mask of cool indifference. Goodbye, Michael, she said softly. I hope you know what you're doing. As the door closed behind her, Michael sank into Janet's chair, his mind whirling. The encounter with Victoria had shaken him more than he cared to admit. She represented everything he was trying to leave behind: the cutthroat business practices, the focus on profit above all else, the disregard for the human cost of their deals. But her visit had also strengthened his resolve. Seeing Victoria, being reminded of the person he used to be, only reinforced how much he had changed, how much he wanted to continue changing. A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. Janet peeked in, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "Everything all right, Michael?" He nodded, managing a small smile. "Yes, thank you, Janet. Just ghosts from the past." Janet entered the room fully, closing the door behind her. "I couldn't help but overhear parts of your conversation," she admitted. "This woman, she seemed to know about the Sunnyside deal. Should we be concerned?" Michael shook his head. "No, I don't think so. Victoria's information is outdated. She thought we were moving forward with the original plan to develop the area." Janet studied him for a long moment. "You know, Michael, when you first presented this new direction to the board, I had my doubts. But seeing you stand your ground just now, hearing the passion in your voice, I'm starting to believe this might be exactly what Lancaster Consortium needs." Michael felt a surge of hope. "Ma, does this mean you'll support the proposal?" Janet held up a hand. "I can't speak for the entire board, but I can tell you that you've got my vote, and I'll do what I can to bring others around." Relief washed over Michael. It wasn't a complete victory, but it was a start. "Thank you, Janet. You won't regret this." As Janet left to reconvene the board meeting, Michael pulled out his phone. He had an overwhelming urge to call Samantha, to share this small victory with her, but as he scrolled to her name in his contacts, he hesitated. What was he doing? Yes, Samantha had opened his eyes to a new way of doing business, had ignited a passion for community development he never knew he had. But was it more than that? The way his heart raced when he thought of her, the way her smile seemed to light up even the darkest corners of his mind. Michael shook his head, trying to clear his thoughts. He couldn't afford to be distracted right now. There was still so much work to be done, convincing the rest of the board, raising funds for Sunnyside, implementing their plan for community-focused development. And yet, as he made his way back to the boardroom to face whatever decision awaited him, Michael couldn't shake the image of Samantha's face from his mind. Her determination, her passion, her unwavering belief in the goodness of people. It had awakened something in him, something he thought he'd lost long ago. As he pushed open the boardroom doors, ready to fight for his vision, Michael realized that saving Sunnyside had become about more than just fulfilling his grandfather's conditions, or even about changing the direction of Lancaster Consortium. It had become about becoming the kind of man who deserved someone like Samantha Davis in his life. The board members looked up as he entered, their faces a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and, in some cases, grudging respect. Michael took his place at the head of the table, feeling more certain of his path than ever before. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice strong and clear, "I know what I'm proposing is a significant change for Lancaster Consortium, but I believe with all my heart that it's the right change. Not just for our company, not just for our bottom line, but for the communities we serve and the legacy we want to leave behind." As he launched into his final plea, Michael felt a sense of calm wash over him. Whatever the outcome, he knew he was on the right path. The journey ahead would be challenging, filled with obstacles both personal and professional. But for the first time in years, Michael Johnson felt truly alive, truly purposeful. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, he was one step closer to fulfilling his grandfather's wish, finding not just success, but love and fulfillment as well. The boardroom fell silent as Michael concluded his impassioned speech. The tension in the air was palpable as the board members exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of thoughtfulness, skepticism, and in some cases, reluctant admiration. Michael stood at the head of the table, his heart pounding but his resolve unwavering. Janet Lee, the board's chairwoman, cleared her throat. "Thank you, Michael, for that enlightening presentation." I think I speak for all of us when I say that this is certainly a bold new direction for Lancaster Consortium. She paused, her eyes scanning the faces around the table. Before we put this to a vote, does anyone have any final questions or concerns they'd like to address? Richard Hawthorne, the board member who had been most vocally opposed to Michael's proposal, leaned forward. I still have reservations about the financial implications of this plan. We're talking about a significant investment in a community center and an unproven model of socially responsible development. How can we justify this to our shareholders? Michael took a deep breath, channeling the passion he'd felt at Sunnyside into his response. Mr. Hawthorne, I understand your concerns, but I believe that by investing in communities like Sunnyside, we're not just doing the right thing morally. We're positioning Lancaster Consortium for long-term success. Studies have shown that companies with strong corporate social responsibility programs outperform their peers in the long run. We have the opportunity to be leaders in this space, to show that profit and purpose can go hand in hand. Elena Rodriguez, another board member, spoke up. I see the potential here, Michael, but what about the practical aspects? How do we ensure that this community-focused development model is sustainable and replicable? Michael nodded, appreciating the thoughtful question. Great point, Elena. We'll start with Sunnyside as our pilot project, working closely with community leaders like Samantha Davis to develop a model that can be adapted to other neighborhoods. We'll establish clear metrics for success, not just financial, but also social impact indicators, and we'll be transparent about our progress, sharing both our successes and our challenges along the way. As the discussion continued, Michael could sense the mood in the room shifting. Some board members who had initially been skeptical were now nodding along, while others still looked uncertain but less openly hostile. Finally, Janet called for a vote. Were all those in favor of approving Michael's proposal for a new direction in community-focused development, beginning with the Sunnyside project? Please raise your hand. Michael held his breath as hands began to rise. Janet, Elena, 3 more, 5, 7, and those opposed. Richard Hawthorne's hand shot up immediately, followed by 2 others. Michael's heart sank for a moment, but then he did a quick count. 7 in favor, 3 opposed, with 2 abstentions. Janet's voice cut through the tension. The motion passes. Lancaster Consortium will move forward with the Sunnyside project and explore further opportunities for community-focused development. A wave of relief washed over Michael. They'd done it. The first crucial step in saving Sunnyside and transforming Lancaster Consortium had been taken. As the meeting adjourned and board members filed out, some offering congratulations while others eyed him warily, Michael felt a mix of elation and trepidation. This was just the beginning. The real work and the real challenges lay ahead. He was so lost in thought that he almost didn't notice Janet approaching. "Congratulations, Michael," she said, a small smile playing at her lips. "You've won the battle, but the war is far from over. I hope you're prepared for what comes next." Michael nodded, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "I am, Janet, and thank you for your support. I know this is a big change, but I truly believe it's the right move for Lancaster Consortium." As he gathered his things and headed for the elevator, Michael's mind was already racing with next steps. He needed to call Samantha, to share the news and start planning their next moves. There was so much to do. Fundraising events to organize, community meetings to plan, partnerships to forge. The elevator doors slid open, and Michael was surprised to find Sarah, his assistant, waiting for him. Her expression was a mix of excitement and concern. "Mr. Johnson, congratulations on the board's decision, but there's something you need to know. That woman who came to see you earlier, Victoria Sinclair, she didn't leave the building. She's been asking questions, talking to some of the junior executives. I think she might be up to something." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. Victoria. In his elation over the board's decision, he'd almost forgotten about her surprise appearance. But of course, she wouldn't give up so easily. If there was one thing he remembered about Victoria, it was her tenacity and her willingness to play dirty to get what she wanted. Thank you, Sarah," he said, his mind already shifting gears. "Keep an eye on the situation, but don't engage directly. I'll handle Victoria." As he stepped into the elevator, Michael's phone buzzed with a text message. His heart leapt when he saw it was from Samantha. "How did the board meeting go? The suspense is killing us here at Sunnyside." A smile spread across Michael's face as he typed his reply. "We won. The board approved the plan. Sunnyside is safe, and we're moving forward with the Community Development Initiative." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "Can we meet? There's a lot to discuss, and I'd like to celebrate this win with you." As he hit send, Michael felt a flutter in his stomach that had nothing to do with business deals or board meetings. The connection he felt with Samantha was growing stronger by the day, and he couldn't deny the attraction he felt towards her. But was it just gratitude for opening his eyes to a new way of doing business, or was it something more? The elevator doors opened, and Michael stepped out into the lobby. He was immediately struck by the contrast between the polished marble floors and designer furniture of Lancaster Consortium's headquarters and the worn but welcoming atmosphere of Sunnyside Community Center. Two worlds, so different yet now inextricably linked in his mind. As he made his way towards the exit, Michael caught sight of a familiar figure in the reflection of a glass partition. Victoria was standing near the reception desk, engaged in what looked like an intense conversation with one of Lancaster's project managers. Michael's steps faltered for a moment. Should he confront her, demand to know what she was up to? But no, he decided, now wasn't the time. He needed to focus on the positive, on sharing the good news with Samantha and the Sunnyside community, on beginning the real work of making their vision a reality. As he pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out into the Miami sunshine, Michael felt a sense of purpose and excitement he hadn't experienced in years. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with potential pitfalls and challenges. Victoria's presence was a reminder that there were forces aligned against his new vision, people who would resist the changes he was trying to make. But for the first time in a long time, Michael felt truly alive. He was no longer just going through the motions, chasing profits and accolades. He was fighting for something he believed in, something that could make a real difference in people's lives. His phone buzzed again, another text from Samantha. "That's amazing news. Yes, let's meet. Sunnyside at 7. We'll have a little celebration with the community. Can't wait to see you and hear all about it." As Michael typed his reply, confirming the meeting, he couldn't help but smile. The thought of seeing Samantha, of sharing this victory with her and the Sunnyside community, filled him with a warmth he hadn't felt in years. He hailed a taxi, giving the driver the address for Sunnyside Community Center. As the car pulled away from the curb, Michael gazed out at the Miami skyline. The gleaming towers of the business district slowly gave way to more modest buildings, the streets becoming livelier, filled with the vibrant energy of real communities. Michael's mind wandered to his grandfather's letter, to the ultimatum that had set this whole journey in motion. Find true love and marry within a week, or lose everything. It had seemed an impossible task, a cruel joke even. But now, as he thought of Samantha, of the passion they shared for making a difference, he wondered if perhaps his grandfather had known exactly what he was doing. Was this what love felt like? Not the calculated partnerships he'd pursued in the past, not the cold ambition he'd shared with someone like Victoria, but this feeling of shared purpose, of mutual respect and growing affection. As the taxi neared Sunnyside, Michael felt a sense of anticipation building in his chest. He was eager to share the good news, yes, but more than that, he was eager to see Samantha, to see her eyes light up with excitement, to feel the warmth of her smile. The journey ahead was still long and uncertain, There were obstacles to overcome, doubters to convince, and a community to uplift. But as the familiar facade of Sunnyside Community Center came into view, Michael felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just working for himself or for profit. He was working for something bigger, something meaningful. And just maybe, he thought as he stepped out of the taxi, he was also working towards fulfilling his grandfather's final wish, finding not just success, but love and true happiness as well. As Michael approached the Sunnyside Community Center, he could hear the muffled sounds of excitement emanating from within. The weathered brick building seemed to pulse with life, a stark contrast to the sterile boardrooms he'd left behind just hours ago. He paused for a moment, straightening his tie and taking a deep breath. This was it, the moment of truth, when he'd share the news that would change everything for this community. Pushing open the door, Michael was immediately engulfed in a wave of warmth and jubilation. The main room was packed with people, families, elderly residents, teenagers, all mingling together in a vibrant tapestry of community. Colorful streamers hung from the ceiling, and a hastily made banner proclaiming Sunnyside Lives stretched across one wall. As he made his way through the crowd, Michael was struck by the genuine affection and gratitude in the faces that turned towards him. These were people who had been living under the shadow of uncertainty for so long, and now, thanks to the decision made in that sterile boardroom, they had hope. "Mr. Johnson," a familiar voice cut through the chatter, and Michael turned to see Jake, the teenager he'd met on his first visit to Sunnyside, pushing through the crowd. "Is it true? Did we really win?" Michael felt a lump form in his throat at the hope shining in Jake's eyes. "We did, Jake," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sunnyside is safe." A cheer went up from those nearby who had overheard, and suddenly Michael found himself surrounded by people wanting to shake his hand, to thank him, to share their relief and joy. It was overwhelming, but in the best possible way. And then, through the sea of faces, he saw her. Samantha was making her way towards him, her face radiant with a mixture of joy and something else, something that made Michael's heart skip a beat. As their eyes met, the noise of the celebration seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of them in a bubble of shared triumph. "Michael," Samantha said as she reached him, her voice soft but filled with emotion, "you did it. You really did it." Without thinking, Michael pulled her into a hug. "We did it," he corrected her, reveling in the warmth of her embrace. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Samantha." As they pulled apart, Michael became acutely aware of the eyes on them. The room had quieted, the community members watching this interaction with interest. He cleared his throat, suddenly feeling a bit self-conscious. "I think they're waiting for a speech," Samantha said with a small laugh, her eyes twinkling. Michael nodded, gathering his thoughts. As he turned to address the room, he felt Samantha's hand slip into his, giving it a reassuring squeeze. The gesture sent a jolt of electricity through him, grounding him and giving him strength. "Friends," he began, his voice carrying across the now quiet room, "today marks a new beginning for Sunnyside. The board of Lancaster Consortium has approved our plan not just to save this community center, but to make it a model for a new kind of community-focused development." A cheer went up, but Michael held up his hand, continuing, "This is just the first step on a long journey. We have a lot of work ahead of us, fundraising, renovations, expanding programs. But standing here, looking at all of you, I know we're up for the challenge." As he spoke, Michael felt a surge of emotion. This was so different from the corporate speeches he was used to giving. Here, every word mattered not because of stock prices or profit margins, but because of the real key tangible impact they would have on people's lives. "Sunnyside isn't just a building," he said, echoing Samantha's words from their first meeting. "It's the heart of this community, and together we're going to make that heart stronger than ever." The room erupted in applause and cheers. As Michael stepped back, he felt Samantha's arms slip around his waist. That was perfect. she whispered, her breath warm against his ear. For the next hour, Michael and Samantha moved through the crowd, talking with community members, listening to their ideas and concerns, and sharing in their joy. Michael was struck by how at ease he felt here, how natural it seemed to engage with people on this level. It was a far cry from the Michael Johnson of just a week ago, who would have been uncomfortable and out of place in such a setting. As the celebration began to wind down, Samantha pulled Michael aside. "There's something I want to show you," she said, a hint of excitement in her voice. She led him down a hallway to a small office, closing the door behind them. The office was cluttered but cozy, clearly Samantha's personal space. What caught Michael's attention, however, was the large whiteboard covering one wall. It was filled with notes, diagrams, and ideas, a visual representation of their plans for Sunnyside's future. "I've been working on this ever since our first meeting," Samantha explained, a hint of shyness in her voice. "I wanted to have a clear vision of what we could achieve, something to keep us focused and motivated." Michael stepped closer to the board, taking in the details. There were plans for expanded educational programs, a community garden, partnerships with local businesses for job training. It was comprehensive, ambitious, and utterly inspiring. "Samantha, this is incredible," he breathed, turning to face her. "You've thought of everything," she shrugged, a small smile playing at her lips. "I've had a lot of time to dream about what Sunnyside could be. I just never thought I'd have the resources to make those dreams a reality." Their eyes met, and Michael felt that now familiar flutter in his stomach. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. He took a step closer, drawn in by the passion and intelligence shining in Samantha's eyes. "We make a good team," he said softly, his hand reaching out to tuck a stray strand of hair behind her ear. Samantha's breath hitched at the contact. "We do," she agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, they stood there, the air thick with possibility. Michael found himself leaning in, drawn by an irresistible force. Samantha's eyes fluttered closed, her lips parting slightly. A sharp knock on the door jolted them apart. "Samantha, Mr. Johnson, are you in there?" It was Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman Michael had met on his first visit to Sunnyside. Samantha cleared her throat, a blush coloring her cheeks. "Yes, Mrs. Henderson, we'll be right out." As they moved to leave the office, Michael caught Samantha's hand. "We should talk," he said softly. "Maybe dinner tomorrow night." Samantha nodded, a mix of excitement and uncertainty in her eyes. "I'd like that." As they rejoined the dwindling celebration, Michael's mind was whirling. The almost kiss in Samantha's office had brought his growing feelings for her into sharp focus, but it had also raised a host of complications. What about his grandfather's ultimatum? The week was nearly up, and while his feelings for Samantha were deepening, was it really love? And even if it was, how could he possibly explain the situation to her without sounding insane or manipulative? Moreover, there was the professional aspect to consider. They were embarking on a significant business venture together. Would a personal relationship complicate that? And what about the board? They had just barely approved his new vision for Lancaster Consortium. How would they react if they thought he was mixing business with pleasure? As Michael said his goodbyes and headed for the exit, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a text from Sarah, his assistant. "Mr. Johnson, Victoria Sinclair has been making inquiries about Sunnyside and our new community development initiative. She's scheduled a meeting with Richard Hawthorne for tomorrow morning. I thought you should know." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. Victoria. In the euphoria of the board's decision and the celebration at Sunnyside, he'd almost forgotten about her. But of course, she wouldn't give up so easily. And Richard Hawthorne had been the most vocal opponent of his plan on the board. If Victoria was meeting with him, as he stepped out into the cool night air, Michael felt the weight of his various challenges pressing down on him. The path ahead was more complicated than ever, filled with personal and professional pitfalls. His growing feelings for Samantha, the looming deadline of his grandfather's ultimatum, the threat posed by Victoria, the skepticism of some board members, all of these factors swirled together in a dizzying mix of opportunity and danger. But as he looked back at the warmly lit windows of Sunnyside Community Center, Michael felt a renewed sense of determination. He had come too far, changed too much, to turn back now. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head-on. For Sunnyside, for the community that had welcomed him so warmly, for Samantha, and for the man he was becoming, a man his grandfather would be proud of. With a deep breath, Michael hailed a taxi. As he slid into the back seat and gave the driver his address, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow. Dinner with Samantha, a chance to explore the connection growing between them. But first, he had a meeting with Victoria and Richard Hawthorne to prepare for. The game was far from over, and Michael Johnson was ready to play. The morning sun had barely peeked over Miami's skyline when Michael Johnson strode into Lancaster Consortium's headquarters. The usual buzz of early morning activity felt muted, as if the building itself sensed the tension brewing within its walls. Michael's jaw was set, his eyes focused, as he made his way to the executive floor. As the elevator doors slid open, Sarah was waiting for him, a look of concern etched on her face. "Mr. Johnson," she said, falling into step beside him. "Victoria Sinclair and Richard Hawthorne are already in the conference room. They've been there for almost an hour." Michael nodded, his mind racing. An hour was a long time for Victoria to work her manipulative magic on Richard, who had already been skeptical of the Sunnyside project. "Thank you, Sarah. Any idea what they've been discussing?" Sarah shook her head. "They've been very secretive, but..." She hesitated, lowering her voice. "I overheard Victoria mentioning something about alternative development plans for Sunnyside." A cold knot formed in Michael's stomach. Of course. Victoria wouldn't just give up. She'd try to undermine the project from within. He took a deep breath, steeling himself for the confrontation ahead. "All right, Sarah, hold my calls. And if Samantha Davis from Sunnyside calls, tell her I'll get back to her as soon as I can." As he approached the conference room, Michael could hear muffled voices through the door. He paused for a moment, gathering his thoughts, then pushed the door open with more force than necessary. Victoria and Richard looked up, startled by his sudden entrance. Victoria recovered quickly, a sly smile spreading across her face. "Michael, darling," she purred, "how lovely of you to join us. We were just discussing some exciting possibilities for Sunnyside." Michael's eyes narrowed as he took in the scene. Victoria, impeccably dressed as always, was leaning towards Richard, her body language intimating closeness and conspiracy. Richard, for his part, looked both intrigued and slightly uncomfortable. "I'm sure you were," Michael said, his voice cool. "Care to fill me in on these exciting possibilities?" Richard cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. "Now, Michael, don't get defensive. We were simply exploring some options that might be more financially viable for Lancaster Consortium." Michael felt his anger rising but forced himself to remain calm. He'd learned from Samantha the power of listening, of truly understanding before reacting. "I see," he said, taking a seat at the head of the table. "And what options might those be?" Victoria's smile widened, a predatory gleam in her eye. "Oh, Michael," she said, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "I know you've become attached to this little community center. But surely you can see that the potential for profit in that area is so much greater than what your current plan offers." She spread out a series of documents on the table, sleek renderings of high-rise condos and upscale shopping centers. "Just imagine," she continued, "a completely revitalized neighborhood, luxury apartments, boutique shops, gourmet restaurants. The property values would skyrocket, and Lancaster Consortium would be at the forefront of Miami's most exciting new development." Michael felt a familiar pull, the allure of profit, of prestige, of being the most successful developer in Miami. It was everything he'd wanted just a week ago. But now, as he looked at Victoria's plans, all he could see were the faces of the people he'd met at Sunnyside. Jake, whose future hinged on the center's programs, Mrs. Henderson, who found purpose and community there, and Samantha, whose passion and vision had opened his eyes to a new way of doing business. He took a deep breath, centering himself. When he spoke, his voice was calm but firm. "Those are certainly impressive plans, Victoria, but they're not what Lancaster Consortium is interested in pursuing." Victoria's smile faltered for a moment before she recovered. "Come now, Michael. Don't tell me you've gone soft. The Michael Johnson I knew would never pass up an opportunity like this." "You're right," Michael said, standing up. "The Michael Johnson you knew wouldn't. But I'm not that person anymore." He turned to Richard, who had been watching the exchange with growing interest. "Mr. Hawthorne, I know you had reservations about our new direction, but let me ask you this. What kind of legacy do you want Lancaster Consortium to leave? Do you want us to be remembered as just another developer who pushed out communities for profit? Or do you want us to be pioneers, showing that it's possible to be successful while also making a positive impact on people's lives?" Richard's brow furrowed as he considered Michael's words. "It's not that simple, Michael. We have shareholders to consider, profit margins to maintain." "I understand that," Michael said, his voice passionate. "Oh, but think about the long-term benefits. By investing in communities like Sunnyside, we're not just doing the right thing morally. We're positioning Lancaster Consortium for sustainable, long-term success. We'll have the goodwill of the community, positive press, and the opportunity to develop a model that can be replicated in other neighborhoods." He could see Richard wavering, the seeds of doubt planted, but Victoria wasn't done yet. She stood, her eyes flashing with anger. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "You're throwing away millions of dollars for what? A run-down community center and a bunch of people who can't afford to live in the kinds of properties we develop." Michael felt a surge of anger at her dismissive tone, but he forced himself to remain calm. He turned to face her fully, his voice low and intense. "Those people, Victoria, are the heart of this city. They're the ones who make Miami more than just a collection of fancy buildings, and they deserve better than to be pushed out of their homes for the sake of our profit margins." He turned back to Richard, his voice softening. "Mr. Hawthorne, I'm asking you to trust me on this. Come visit Sunnyside with me. Meet the people there. See the impact our investment could have. If, after that, you still think Victoria's plan is the better option, I'll step down as CEO and support whatever decision the board makes." Richard's eyebrows shot up at this declaration. Even Victoria looked shocked. "You'd step down?" Richard asked, disbelief evident in his voice. Michael nodded, his resolve firm. "That's how much I believe in this project, in this new direction for Lancaster Consortium. It's not just about Sunnyside. It's about who we want to be as a company, as members of this community." A heavy silence fell over the room. Richard looked thoughtful, while Victoria's face was a mask of barely contained fury. Finally, Richard spoke. "All right, Michael, I'll visit Sunnyside with you, but I'm not making any promises." Michael felt a wave of relief wash over him. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a chance. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. I appreciate your willingness to keep an open mind." As Richard gathered his things and left the room, Victoria rounded on Michael, her composure finally cracking. "You fool," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? What we could have built together?" Michael met her gaze steadily. "I know exactly what I'm choosing, Victoria, and it's worth far more than any luxury condo development." As Victoria stormed out of the room, Michael sank into a chair, the adrenaline of the confrontation leaving him feeling drained. He pulled out his phone, scrolling to Samantha's number. He needed to warn her about Victoria's plans, to prepare her for the possibility that their fight wasn't over yet. But as he was about to hit dial, he hesitated. The almost kiss from the night before flashed through his mind, along with all the complications it brought. His growing feelings for Samantha, the looming deadline of his grandfather's ultimatum, the delicate balance of their professional relationship. It all swirled together in a confusing mix of emotions. Just then, a new text message popped up on his screen. It was from his grandfather's lawyer, Mr. Johnson. Just a reminder that the deadline for fulfilling your grandfather's conditions is in 3 days. Please update me on your progress at your earliest convenience. Michael stared at the message, feeling the weight of his grandfather's expectations pressing down on him. He had been so caught up in the Sunnyside project, in his evolving relationship with Samantha, that he'd almost forgotten about the ticking clock hanging over his head. As he sat there, torn between his duty to his grandfather's wishes and his growing commitment to Sunnyside and Samantha, Michael realized that he was approaching a crossroads. The decisions he made in the next few days would shape not just his future, but the futures of Sunnyside, Lancaster Consortium, and perhaps most importantly, his relationship with Samantha. With a deep breath, Michael stood up, straightening his tie. He had a dinner date with Samantha tonight, a chance to explore the connection growing between them. But first, he had a community center to protect and a skeptical board member to convince. As he left the conference room, Michael felt a mix of determination and uncertainty. The path ahead was unclear, filled with potential pitfalls and life-changing decisions. But one thing was certain: the Michael Johnson who walked out of that room was not the same man who had received his grandfather's letter just a week ago. He was changing, growing, becoming someone he could be proud of. And as he stepped into the elevator, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, Michael couldn't help but wonder if perhaps this transformation was exactly what his grandfather had hoped for all along. The Miami sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and pink as Michael Johnson stood outside La Perla, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. He adjusted his tie nervously, his mind racing with thoughts of the day's events and the evening ahead. The confrontation with Victoria and Richard seemed a world away now, replaced by a mixture of excitement and anxiety about his dinner with Samantha. As he waited, Michael couldn't help but reflect on the whirlwind of the past week. Had it really been only 7 days since he'd received his grandfather's letter? The Michael Johnson who had opened that envelope seemed like a stranger now, focused solely on profit margins and corporate success. The man standing here tonight was different, changed by his experiences at Sunnyside and his growing feelings for Samantha Davis. "Michael." He turned at the sound of her voice, and his breath caught in his throat. Samantha stood before him, a vision in a simple yet elegant blue dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes. Her hair, usually pulled back in a practical ponytail, fell in soft waves around her shoulders. "Samantha," he managed, his voice slightly husky, "you look beautiful." A faint blush colored her cheeks as she smiled. "Thank you. You clean up pretty well yourself." As they entered the restaurant, Michael placed his hand lightly on the small of Samantha's back, guiding her. The simple touch sent a jolt of electricity through him, a reminder of the almost kiss they'd shared in her office the night before. The maitre d' led them to a secluded table with a view of Miami's glittering skyline. As they settled in, Michael couldn't help but notice how out of place Samantha looked in this opulent setting. Not because she didn't fit in, but because her natural warmth and authenticity seemed to highlight the artificiality of their surroundings. "This is quite a place," Samantha said, her eyes taking in the crystal chandeliers and marble columns. "I feel a bit like I've stepped into another world." Michael smiled ruefully. This used to be my world," he admitted. "Fancy restaurants, exclusive clubs. I thought it was what success looked like." Samantha tilted her head, studying him. "And now, Michael said softly, meeting her gaze, "I'm not so sure. You've shown me a different kind of success, Samantha. One that's measured in lives changed and communities strengthened, not just in dollars and cents." The waiter arrived with menus, momentarily breaking the intensity of their exchange. As they perused the offerings, Michael couldn't help but notice Samantha's eyes widening at the prices. "Michael," she whispered, leaning in, "these prices are insane. We could feed half of Sunnyside for what they're charging for a single meal here." Her words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. She was right, of course. The extravagance of this restaurant, which he'd once taken for granted, now seemed almost obscene in light of the needs he'd seen at Sunnyside. "You're absolutely right," he said, closing his menu decisively. "What do you say we get out of here? I know a great little Cuban place not far from here. It's nothing fancy, but the food is incredible." Samantha's face lit up with a genuine smile. "That sounds perfect." As they left the restaurant, ignoring the maitre d's confused looks, Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. This was right. This felt more like the person he was becoming, the person he wanted to be. They walked the few blocks to El Sabor de Cuba, a small, family-owned restaurant tucked away on a side street. The aroma of spices and slow-cooked meats wafted out as they entered, and the warm greetings of the staff made them feel instantly welcome. As they settled into a cozy booth, Samantha looked around with appreciation. "Now this," she said, "feels like real Miami." Their conversation flowed easily as they shared plates of ropa vieja, black beans and rice, and sweet plantains. Michael found himself opening up to Samantha in a way he never had with anyone before, sharing stories of his childhood, his relationship with his grandfather, and his growing disillusionment with the cutthroat world of corporate real estate. In turn, Samantha spoke of her own journey, growing up in a working-class neighborhood, not unlike the one surrounding Sunnyside, her struggles to get an education, and her passionate commitment to community development. As they talked, Michael felt the connection between them deepening. It wasn't just physical attraction or shared goals. There was a genuine understanding, a meeting of minds and hearts that both exhilarated and terrified him. But even as he reveled in their connection, a nagging voice in the back of his mind reminded him of the ticking clock. His grandfather's ultimatum loomed large, casting a shadow over the evening. How could he explain this impossible situation to Samantha without sounding manipulative or insane? As if sensing his inner turmoil, Samantha reached across the table, placing her hand gently on his. "Michael, is everything okay? You seem to drift away for a moment there." He looked into her concerned eyes and made a split-second decision. He couldn't keep this secret any longer. If there was any chance of a real relationship with Samantha, it had to be built on honesty. "Indeed, Samantha," he began, his voice low and serious, "there's something I need to tell you, something that might change the way you see me, and this whole situation with Sunnyside." He took a deep breath and launched into the story of his grandfather's letter and the ultimatum it contained. As he spoke, he watched Samantha's expression change from confusion to disbelief, to something unreadable. When he finished, a heavy silence fell between them. Samantha withdrew her hand, and Michael felt its absence keenly. "Let me get this straight," she said finally, her voice carefully controlled. "You initially got involved with Sunnyside because you needed to find a wife within a week to inherit your grandfather's fortune." Michael winced at the bluntness of her words, but he couldn't deny their truth. "Yes," he admitted, "that's how it started. But Samantha, you have to believe me. Everything changed the moment I met you, the moment I saw what Sunnyside meant to the community. My motivations now are completely different." Samantha's eyes flashed with a mixture of hurt and anger. "How can I be sure of that, Michael? How do I know this isn't all just an elaborate plan to fulfill your grandfather's conditions?" Her words stung, but Michael knew he deserved them. "I know it sounds crazy," he said, leaning forward intently, "and I understand if you're angry, but I'm telling you this now because I don't want there to be any secrets between us. What I feel for you, what I feel for Sunnyside, it's real, Samantha. More real than anything I've ever experienced." Samantha stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need some air," she said, her voice shaky. "I need to think." As she rushed out of the restaurant, Michael felt as if his world was crumbling around him. He quickly threw some cash on the table and followed her out into the warm Miami night. He found her standing on the sidewalk, arms wrapped around herself as if for protection. "Samantha," he said softly, approaching her cautiously, I'm so sorry. I never meant to hurt you." She turned to face him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. I believe that you didn't mean to hurt me, Michael, but can't you see how this looks? How can I trust that your feelings for me, your commitment to Sunnyside, isn't just a means to an end?" Michael felt a desperation rising within him. He reached out, gently taking her hands in his, because the Michael Johnson, who received that letter a week ago, no longer exists, he said fervently. "You've changed me, Samantha. Sunnyside has changed me. I'm not that man anymore." Samantha looked into his eyes, searching for the truth. "I want to believe you, Michael, but I need time to process this. It's a lot to take in." Michael nodded, his heart heavy but understanding. "Of course. Take all the time you need, but please, don't give up on us, on what we're trying to do for Sunnyside. Whatever happens between us personally, my commitment to the community center is real." Samantha gave him a small, sad smile. "I believe that at least. Good night, Michael." As she walked away, hailing a taxi, Michael felt as if a piece of his heart was going with her. He stood there on the sidewalk long after her taxi had disappeared into the Miami traffic, grappling with the consequences of his revelation. He had done the right thing by telling her the truth. He knew that. But at what cost? Had he jeopardized not only his chance at love, but also the future of Sunnyside? As he finally turned to head home, Michael's phone buzzed with a text. It was from Richard Hawthorne. "Johnson, I've been thinking about what you said. I'll visit Sunnyside tomorrow. Be ready to convince me." Michael stared at the message, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on him. The visit from Richard could make or break the Sunnyside project, and now, with Samantha's trust shaken, he would have to face this crucial meeting without her by his side. As he hailed a taxi of his own, Michael realized that tomorrow would be a defining moment for Sunnyside, for his career, and for his relationship with Samantha. The stakes had never been higher, and the path forward had never been less clear. But as the taxi wove through the Miami streets, taking him back to his empty penthouse, Michael felt a resolve hardening within him. He had come too far, changed too much, to give up now. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head-on, for Sunnyside, for Samantha, and for the man he was becoming. The game was far from over, and Michael Johnson was determined to see it through to the end, no matter the personal cost. The morning sun cast long shadows across Miami's streets as Michael Johnson's car pulled up in front of Sunnyside Community Center. He had barely slept, his mind racing with thoughts of Samantha and the impending visit from Richard Hawthorne. As he stepped out of the car, straightening his tie, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that today would be a turning point, for better or worse. The community center looked different in the harsh light of morning. The peeling paint and cracked sidewalk seemed more pronounced, a stark reminder of the challenges they faced. But as Michael approached the entrance, he could hear the sounds of life within, children laughing, the clatter of dishes from the kitchen, the murmur of conversation. This was what they were fighting for, he reminded himself. Not just a building, but a beating heart of the community. As he pushed open the door, Michael was immediately engulfed in the controlled chaos of a typical morning at Sunnyside. Children raced past him on their way to the daycare program, elderly residents gathered for their morning coffee club, and volunteers bustled about, preparing for the day's activities. Mr. Johnson, Jake, the teenager Michael had come to know over the past week, approached him with a grin. "We didn't expect to see you so early. Is everything okay?" Michael managed a smile, touched by the young man's concern. "Everything's fine, Jake. We've got an important visitor coming today, someone who could help secure Sunnyside's future. I wanted to make sure everything was ready." Jake's eyes widened with understanding. "The board member you told us about. Don't worry, Mr. Johnson. We'll show him what Sunnyside is really about." As Jake hurried off to spread the word, Michael felt a wave of affection for the community that had welcomed him so warmly. They had no idea of the turmoil in his personal life, of the deadline looming over his head, yet here they were, ready to rally around him and fight for their home. Michael made his way to Samantha's office, his heart heavy with the memory of their conversation the night before. He knocked softly, steeling himself for whatever reception he might receive. "Come in," Samantha's voice called out, sounding tired but professional. As Michael entered, he was struck by the change in Samantha's demeanor. Gone was the warmth and easy familiarity they had shared. In its place was a cool professionalism that felt like a wall between them. "Michael," she said, not quite meeting his eyes, "I assume you're here about Mr. Hawthorne's visit?" Michael nodded, trying to ignore the ache in his chest at her formal tone. "Yes, he'll be here in about an hour. I wanted to make sure we were on the same page about how to approach this." Samantha finally looked up at him, her eyes guarded but determined. "Of course, whatever our personal situation, the future of Sunnyside comes first. I've prepared a presentation outlining our plans and the impact we've already had on the community. I think it would be best if we tag-team the tour. You can speak to the business aspects, and I'll focus on the community impact." Michael felt a glimmer of hope at her words. Despite everything, Samantha was still willing to work with him for the good of Sunnyside. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. "That sounds perfect," he said, offering a tentative smile. "Samantha, I know things are complicated between us right now, but I want you to know—" He was interrupted by a knock at the door. Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who seemed to be everywhere at once, poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, dears, but there's a gentleman here asking for Mr. Johnson. Says his name is Hawthorne." Michael and Samantha exchanged a look of surprise. Richard was early. "Show him to the main room, Mrs. Henderson," Samantha said, smoothly taking charge. "We'll be right there." As Mrs. Henderson left, Samantha turned to Michael, her professional mask slipping for just a moment to reveal a mix of determination and vulnerability. "Ready for this?" Michael nodded, wishing he could reach out and take her hand, to draw strength from her presence as he had over the past week. But the distance between them felt insurmountable at that moment. "As ready as I'll ever be," he said instead. They made their way to the main room, where they found Richard Hawthorne standing awkwardly in the center, looking decidedly out of place in his expensive suit. His eyes darted around, taking in the mismatched furniture, the children's artwork on the walls, the general wear and tear of a well-used community space. "Mr. Hawthorne," Michael said, stepping forward with an outstretched hand, "thank you for coming. I'd like you to meet Samantha Davis, the heart and soul of Sunnyside Community Center." Richard shook their hands, his expression guarded. "Ms. Davis, Mr. Johnson, I hope you understand that my presence here doesn't indicate any change in my position. I'm merely here to observe." Samantha smiled, unfazed by his cool demeanor. "Of course, Mr. Hawthorne. We're just glad you're here to see Sunnyside for yourself. Shall we begin the tour?" For the next 2 hours, Michael and Samantha led Richard through every aspect of Sunnyside's operations. They showed him the bustling daycare center, where working parents could leave their children in safe, nurturing hands. They introduced him to the seniors in the computer literacy class, learning skills that would help them stay connected with far-flung family members. In the community kitchen, they met volunteers preparing meals for homebound residents, while in the small library, tutors worked one-on-one with students struggling in school. Every step of the way, Michael and Samantha tag-teamed their presentation, with Michael outlining the financial aspects and potential for growth, while Samantha highlighted the human impact of each program. Throughout the tour, Michael couldn't help but marvel at Samantha's passion and expertise. Despite the personal turmoil between them, she was in her element here, her eyes shining as she spoke about the community she loved. He found himself falling for her all over again, even as he ached with the knowledge of the rift between them. As they approached the final stop on their tour, the rooftop garden that served as both a source of fresh produce for the community and a therapeutic space for residents, Michael noticed a subtle shift in Richard's demeanor. The board members' initial skepticism had given way to a thoughtful, almost impressed expression. Up on the roof, Surrounded by raised beds full of vegetables and herbs, Samantha made their final pitch. "Mr. Hawthorne," she said, her voice passionate but controlled, "what you've seen today is just the beginning. With Lancaster Consortium's support, we can expand these programs, renovate our facilities, and create a model of community development that could be replicated across the city." Michael stepped in, his business acumen coming to the fore. "Think of the long-term benefits, Richard. Positive press, community goodwill, the opportunity to be at the forefront of socially responsible development. It's not just the right thing to do, it's smart business." Richard was quiet for a long moment, his gaze sweeping across the Miami skyline visible from the rooftop. Finally, he turned to them, his expression unreadable. "I have to admit, this isn't what I expected when I agreed to this visit. You've given me a lot to think about." Hope surged in Michael's chest, but he kept his expression neutral. "That's all we ask, Richard, that you consider the full picture before making a decision." As they made their way back downstairs, Richard paused in the main room, watching as a group of children ran past, laughing. "You know," he said, almost to himself, "I grew up in a neighborhood not unlike this one. There was a center, a bit like Sunnyside, where I spent most of my afternoons while my mother worked. I'd almost forgotten." He trailed off, shaking his head as if to clear away the memories. "Oh, I'll need to discuss this with the rest of the board, of course, but you've made a compelling case, both of you." As Richard left, promising to be in touch soon, Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. It wasn't a definitive victory, but it was far better than he had dared to hope for. He turned to Samantha, unable to contain his smile. "We did it," he said, the "we" encompassing far more than just this presentation. For a moment, Samantha's professional facade cracked, and he saw a glimmer of the warmth they had shared. "We make a good team," she admitted softly. But as quickly as it had appeared, the moment passed. Samantha's expression closed off again, the weight of Michael's revelation from the night before reasserting itself between them. "I should get back to work," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "And there's still so much to do." As she turned to leave, Michael felt a surge of desperation. He couldn't let her go, not like this. "Samantha, wait!" he called out. She paused, looking back at him with a mixture of wariness and something else. Hope, perhaps. "I know I hurt you," Michael said, his voice low and intense. "And I know that trust, once broken, isn't easily repaired. But I meant what I said last night. My feelings for you, for this community, they're real, more real than anything I've ever felt." Samantha's expression softened slightly, but she shook her head. "Michael, But before she could finish, they were interrupted by the sound of raised voices from the entrance. Michael and Samantha exchanged a concerned look before hurrying to investigate. What they found stopped them in their tracks. Victoria Sinclair stood in the doorway, flanked by two men in expensive suits who looked like lawyers. Her eyes gleamed with triumph as she spotted Michael and Samantha. "Well, well," Victoria purred, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Isn't this cozy? I hate to interrupt your little project, but I'm afraid I have some news that might put a damper on your plans." Michael stepped forward, instinctively placing himself between Victoria and Samantha. "What are you talking about, Victoria?" Victoria's smile widened, reminding Michael of a shark circling its prey. "Oh, Michael, did you really think I'd give up so easily? I've done some digging, and it turns out that your precious Sunnyside isn't as secure as you thought. In fact, I have here," she patted a folder one of her lawyers was holding, "documentation that proves Lancaster Consortium has the right to proceed with the original development plans. Plans that, I'm afraid, don't include a quaint little community center." Michael felt the blood drain from his face as the implications of Victoria's words sank in. Behind him, he heard Samantha's sharp intake of breath as Victoria continued to speak, outlining her plans to challenge the board's decision and force through the luxury development. Michael's mind raced. Everything they had worked for, everything they had built over the past week, was suddenly in jeopardy. But as he glanced back at Samantha, seeing the mixture of fear and determination in her eyes, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had come too far, fought too hard, to give up now. Whatever Victoria had planned, whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head-on. For Sunnyside, for the community that had welcomed him so warmly, and for Samantha, the woman who had opened his eyes to a new way of living and loving. The battle for Sunnyside's future was far from over. In fact, it seemed it had only just begun. The tension in Sunnyside Community Centre was palpable as Victoria Sinclair's words hung in the air. Michael Johnson stood his ground, his mind racing to process this new threat, while simultaneously trying to shield Samantha and the community behind him. The bustling activity of the centre had come to a standstill, with curious and concerned faces peering out from various rooms, sensing the confrontation unfolding in their sanctuary. "Victoria," Michael said, his voice low and controlled. "Whatever you think you've found, it doesn't change the board's decision. Lancaster Consortium has committed to supporting Sunnyside." Victoria's crimson lips curved into a predatory smile. "Oh, Michael," she purred, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "You always were so naive. The board's decision is hardly set in stone, especially when they learn about the irregularities I've uncovered in the centre's paperwork." Samantha stepped forward, her eyes flashing with anger. "What irregularities? Sunnyside has always operated above board. We have nothing to hide." Victoria's gaze shifted to Samantha, a look of disdain flickering across her features. "Ms. Davis, is it? I'm afraid this is a matter for the adults in the room. Why don't you run along and organize a bake sale or whatever it is you do here?" Michael felt a surge of anger at Victoria's dismissive tone. "That's enough, Victoria. Samantha is an integral part of this community and this project. Whatever you have to say, you can say it to both of us." A tense silence fell over the room as Victoria studied them, her calculating gaze moving between Michael and Samantha. Finally, she shrugged, a gesture of feigned nonchalance. "Very well. If you insist on airing your dirty laundry in public, who am I to stand in your way?" She nodded to one of her lawyers, who opened the folder he was carrying. "Under it seems that the original land grant for Sunnyside Community Centre included a clause stipulating that the property must be used for the betterment of the community. Our legal team believes that a luxury development, bringing jobs and economic growth to the area, better fulfills this requirement than a run-down community centre." Samantha gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "That's ridiculous. Sunnyside has been serving this community for decades. How can you possibly argue that tearing it down is for the betterment of the community?" Victoria's smile widened. "Oh, it's quite simple, really. We have expert testimonies, economic projections, all showing how our development will revitalize the entire neighborhood. I'm afraid your little art classes and daycare services just don't measure up." Michael felt a chill run down his spine. He knew Victoria was ruthless, but this level of calculation, of willingness to destroy a community for profit, was beyond anything he had expected. He glanced at Samantha, saw the mix of fear and determination in her eyes, and made a decision. "Victoria," he said, his voice firm, "I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. Lancaster Consortium made a commitment to Sunnyside, and we intend to honor it. If you want to challenge that, you'll have to go through me." Victoria's eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine anger breaking through her composed facade. "Be careful, Michael. You're betting an awful lot on this little project of yours. Are you sure it's worth risking everything you've built?" For a moment, Michael hesitated. The weight of his grandfather's ultimatum pressed down on him, reminding him of all that was at stake. But then he felt Samantha's hand on his arm, a gentle touch that spoke volumes. He looked around at the concerned faces of the Sunnyside community members who had gathered, drawn by the commotion. Jake, Mrs. Henderson, the children from the daycare program, all watching, waiting to see if he would stand up for them. In that moment, Michael realized that he had already made his choice. Long before Victoria's appearance, perhaps even before he fully understood it himself, he had committed his heart to Sunnyside and its people. "It's worth everything," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. Sunnyside isn't just a building or a set of programs. It's a home, a family, a lifeline for hundreds of people, and I'll fight for it with everything I have. A murmur of approval rippled through the gathered crowd. Samantha's grip on his arm tightened, and when he glanced at her, he saw a mix of pride and something deeper, more personal, in her eyes. Victoria's composure slipped for a moment, surprise and frustration flashing across her face before she schooled her features back into a mask of cool indifference. "How touching," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Ah, I do hope you remember this moment of misguided heroism when you're packing up your office at Lancaster Consortium." She turned to leave, but paused at the door, looking back over her shoulder. "Oh, and Michael, you might want to check your calendar. I believe you have an important deadline coming up, don't you? It would be a shame if all this noble sacrifice was for nothing." With that parting shot, Victoria swept out of the community center, her lawyers in tow, leaving a wake of uncertainty and fear behind her. As soon as the door closed behind them, the center erupted into a cacophony of voices. Community members pressed forward, asking questions, expressing fears, looking to Michael and Samantha for reassurance. "Everyone, please," Samantha called out, her voice cutting through the noise. "I know you're all worried, but I promise you, we're not giving up. Michael and I will do everything in our power to protect Sunnyside." As Samantha began to address the crowd, calming fears and rallying spirits, Michael felt a tug on his sleeve. He looked down to see Jake, the teenager's face, a mask of concern. "Mr. Johnson," Jake said, his voice low, "what that lady said about a deadline, is it true? Are you risking something big for us?" Michael felt a surge of affection for the young man. "Jake," he said, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, "sometimes in life, we have to take risks for the things that really matter. And Sunnyside, it matters more than anything I've ever fought for." Jake nodded, a look of determination settling over his features. "Then we'll fight with you, all of us. Sunnyside is our home, and we won't let anyone take it away." As Jake moved off to join the others, Michael felt a presence at his side. He turned to find Samantha looking at him, her eyes searching his face. "Michael," she said softly, "what Victoria said about a deadline, does this have something to do with your grandfather's ultimatum?" Michael nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders at being able to share the truth with her. "Yes, I have. I have 2 days left to fulfill his conditions, to find someone to marry, someone I truly love." Samantha's eyes widened with understanding. "And if you don't, I lose everything," Michael said simply. "My position at Lancaster Consortium, my inheritance, all of it." Samantha was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "And you're willing to risk all that for Sunnyside? For us?" Michael turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "Samantha," he said, his voice low and intense, "being here, working with you, getting to know this community, it's shown me what really matters in life. And it's not money or power or corporate success. It's making a difference, being part of something bigger than yourself." He paused, gathering his courage for what he needed to say next. "And yes, it's you. I know we've only known each other for a short time, and I know I hurt you with the truth about how this all started, but somewhere along the way, without even realizing it, I fell in love with you, with your passion, your dedication, your heart. Whatever happens with Victoria, with Lancaster Consortium, with my grandfather's ultimatum, I want you to know that my feelings for you are real, more real than anything I've ever felt." Samantha's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she listened to Michael's declaration. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, she was silent, and Michael felt his heart pounding in his chest, waiting for her response. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Michael, I don't know what to say. This is all so much to process, but I do know one thing. I believe you, and I believe in what we're doing here. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." She squeezed his hands, a small smile playing at her lips. "Now, let's figure out how we're going to save Sunnyside. We've got a community to protect and a battle to win." As they turned to rejoin the others, Michael felt a surge of hope and determination. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with legal challenges and personal dilemmas. Victoria's threat loomed large, and the ticking clock of his grandfather's ultimatum added an extra layer of pressure. But looking around at the determined faces of the Sunnyside community, feeling Samantha's presence at his side, Michael knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them head-on, fighting for the community that had welcomed him, for the woman who had opened his heart, and for the man he was becoming. The battle for Sunnyside's future was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. But for the first time in his life, Michael Johnson felt truly alive, truly purposeful, and he was ready to fight with everything he had. The following morning dawned bright and clear over Miami. But for Michael Johnson and Samantha Davis, the new day brought with it a sense of urgency and determination. They had spent most of the night in Samantha's small office at Sunnyside, poring over documents, making calls, and strategizing their next moves. As the first rays of sunlight streamed through the office window, Michael rubbed his tired eyes and looked over at Samantha. Despite the long night, she seemed energized, her face set in a mask of concentration as she scrolled through yet another legal document on her laptop. "Samantha," Michael said softly, "we should take a break, get some coffee, maybe something to eat. We can't fight this battle if we're running on empty." Samantha looked up, blinking as if coming out of a trance. For a moment, Michael saw the weight of their challenges reflected in her eyes. The threat from Victoria, the looming deadline of his grandfather's ultimatum, the fate of Sunnyside hanging in the balance. But then she smiled, a small but genuine expression that made his heart skip a beat. "You're right," she admitted, stretching her arms above her head. "I could definitely use some caffeine. Let's head down to Joe's Diner. They should be opening up about now, and they make the best breakfast in the neighborhood." As they walked the short distance to the diner, Michael couldn't help but marvel at the change in his perspective. A week ago, he wouldn't have given this modest neighborhood a second glance. Now, he found beauty in the small details, the way the morning light caught the leaves of the trees lining the street, the cheerful good morning calls between neighbors, the sense of community that seemed to permeate every interaction. Joe's Diner was a small, no-frills establishment, but it was clean and welcoming. As they entered, the smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon enveloped them. Joe himself, a burly man with a salt and pepper beard, called out a greeting from behind the counter. "Samantha, good to see you, girl. And who's this handsome fella you've brought with you?" Samantha laughed, the sound lifting Michael's spirits. "Joe, this is Michael Johnson. He's been helping us with the Sunnyside situation." Joe's eyebrows shot up in recognition. "Ah, so you're the big-shot developer who's gone native, huh? Well, any friend of Samantha's is a friend of mine. Coffee's on the house for you two. You look like you could use it." As they settled into a booth, steaming mugs of coffee in front of them, Michael felt some of the tension of the past day begin to ease. He watched as Samantha doctored her coffee with cream and sugar, struck by how comfortable he felt in this simple setting, how right it felt to be here with her. "So," Samantha said, taking a sip of her coffee, "what's our next move? Victoria's not going to back down easily, and we need to be prepared for whatever she throws at us next." Michael nodded, his mind shifting back into strategy mode. "We need to get ahead of this. Victoria's going to try to paint us as obstructionists, standing in the way of progress and economic development. We need to control the narrative, show the real value of Sunnyside to the community." Samantha's eyes lit up with an idea. "What if we put together a community showcase, invite the media, local politicians, business leaders, Show them firsthand what Sunnyside means to the people here. We could have presentations from the kids in our after-school programs, testimonials from families who've benefited from our services. That's brilliant, Michael said, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. And we could use it as an opportunity to unveil our plans for expanding Sunnyside's services. Show that we're not just preserving the status quo, but looking to the future. As they continued to brainstorm, their breakfast arrived, stacks of fluffy pancakes, crispy bacon, and eggs cooked to perfection. They ate with enthusiasm, their conversation flowing easily between strategic planning and more personal topics. "You know," Michael said, pausing to take a sip of coffee, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm actually grateful for my grandfather's ultimatum. If it hadn't been for that letter, I might never have come to Sunnyside, never met you." Samantha's expression softened, but there was still a hint of uncertainty in her eyes. "Michael, about that, I believe you when you say your feelings are real, and I can't deny that I feel something for you too, but with everything that's happening, with so much at stake, is this really the right time to be exploring a relationship?" Michael felt a pang in his chest at her words, but he understood her hesitation. "You're right," he said softly. "There's a lot going on, and the last thing I want to do is complicate things further. But Samantha, I need you to know that no matter what happens with Sunnyside, with Lancaster Consortium, with my grandfather's inheritance, my feelings for you won't change. When this is all over, if you're willing, I'd like to see where this could go." Samantha looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she nodded. "Okay," she said, a small smile playing at her lips. "When this is all over. But for now, we focus on saving Sunnyside," Michael finished for her. As they finished their breakfast and prepared to head back to the community center, Michael's phone buzzed with an incoming call. His heart sank as he saw the name on the screen, Richard Hawthorne. "I should take this," he said to Samantha, his voice tight with tension. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "Richard," Michael answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "What can I do for you?" Richard's voice came through, clipped and businesslike. "Johnson, we need to talk. Victoria Sinclair has presented some concerning information to the board. We're calling an emergency meeting this afternoon. I suggest you be there if you want to salvage your Sunnyside project." Michael's mind raced, trying to process this new development. "Of course, Richard, I'll be there. But I want you to know that whatever Victoria's told you, the truth is—" "Save it for the meeting, Johnson," Richard interrupted. "Just be there at 2 p.m. sharp." With that, the line went dead. Michael lowered the phone, his expression grim as he turned to Samantha. That was Richard Hawthorne. Victoria's made her move. The board's calling an emergency meeting this afternoon. Samantha's face paled, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "Then we'd better be ready. We've got a lot of work to do before 2 p.m. As they hurried back to Sunnyside, Michael's mind was whirling with possibilities and potential strategies. He knew that this meeting could make or break their efforts to save the community center, but more than that, it could determine the future of Lancaster Consortium, his own career, and perhaps even his relationship with Samantha. The stakes had never been higher, and the clock was ticking. With less than 48 hours left before his grandfather's deadline, Michael knew that every decision, every word spoken in that boardroom, could change the course of his life forever. But as he glanced at Samantha, saw the determination in her eyes and the set of her jaw, he felt a surge of confidence. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, and somehow, someway, they would find a way to save Sunnyside and maybe, just maybe, find their own happy ending in the process. The battle for Sunnyside's future was about to reach its climax, and Michael Johnson was ready to fight with everything he had. The gleaming tower of Lancaster Consortium loomed before Michael and Samantha as their taxi pulled up to the curb. The contrast between this world of glass and steel and the warm, lived-in atmosphere of Sunnyside couldn't have been starker. Michael felt the weight of two worlds pressing down on him as he helped Samantha out of the car. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, searching her face for any sign of doubt or fear. Samantha squared her shoulders, her chin lifting with determination. "As ready as I'll ever be. Let's show them what Sunnyside is really about." As they rode the elevator to the top floor, Michael couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in such a short time. Just a week ago, he had been a different man, focused solely on profit margins and corporate success. Now standing beside Samantha, preparing to fight for a community he'd come to love, he barely recognized that version of himself. The elevator doors slid open, revealing the hushed, carpeted hallway that led to the boardroom. Sarah, Michael's assistant, was waiting for them, her face a mask of professional calm tinged with concern. "Mr. Johnson, Ms. Davis," she greeted them. "The board is assembled and waiting." Victoria Sinclair arrived about 10 minutes ago. Michael nodded, feeling a surge of gratitude for Sarah's unwavering support. "Thank you, Sarah. We're as prepared as we can be." As they approached the boardroom doors, Michael felt Samantha's hand slip into his. He looked down at her, surprised by the gesture. "For luck?" she said softly, giving his hand a squeeze before letting go. Drawing strength from her touch, Michael pushed open the doors and strode into the boardroom, Samantha close behind. The atmosphere inside was tense, with board members seated around the long table, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. At the far end of the table sat Victoria Sinclair, a triumphant smile playing at her lips as she watched Michael and Samantha enter. "Ah, Michael," she purred, her voice carrying across the room. "And how kind of you to join us. And you've brought your community organizer. How quaint." Michael felt Samantha stiffen beside him, but was impressed by her composure as she met Victoria's gaze steadily. "That's right," Samantha said, her voice clear and confident. "I'm here to represent the people of Sunnyside, the ones whose lives will be most affected by the board's decision today." Richard Hawthorne, seated at the head of the table, cleared his throat. "Yes, well, let's get started, shall we? We have some serious matters to discuss regarding the future of the Sunnyside project." As Michael and Samantha took their seats, Richard continued, "Ms. Sinclair has brought some concerning information to our attention. Information that calls into question the viability and legality of Lancaster Consortium's involvement with Sunnyside Community Centre." Victoria leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against a folder in front of her. "That's right," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "It seems that our dear Michael, in his haste to play the hero, overlooked some rather significant legal and financial issues." She began to outline her findings: alleged zoning irregularities, questions about Sunnyside's non-profit status, projections showing the potential profit loss for Lancaster Consortium if they pursued the community development plan instead of the luxury condos. As Victoria spoke, Michael could see the board members' expressions changing, doubt creeping in where there had been tentative support. He glanced at Samantha, saw the fire in her eyes, and knew it was time to fight back. "If I may," Michael said, his voice cutting through Victoria's monologue, "I'd like to address these concerns point by point." Over the next hour, Michael and Samantha tag-teamed their defense of Sunnyside. Michael drew on his years of business experience to counter Victoria's financial arguments, showing how the community development plan could lead to long-term growth and positive PR for Lancaster Consortium. Samantha, for her part, spoke passionately about the human impact of Sunnyside, sharing stories of lives changed and communities strengthened. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," Samantha said, her voice filled with conviction, "Sunnyside isn't just a building or a set of programs. It's a lifeline for hundreds of people in our community. It's where children find safety and support after school, where seniors connect and stay active, where families in crisis find the resources they need to get back on their feet." Michael watched the board members' faces as Samantha spoke, saw the way her words were affecting them. Even Richard Hawthorne, who had been so skeptical, seemed to be listening intently. "But don't just take our word for it," Michael said, building on Samantha's momentum. "And we invite all of you to visit Sunnyside yourselves. See firsthand the impact it's having, the potential it holds. We're not just preserving a community center, we're investing in the future of our city." As Michael and Samantha finished their presentation, a heavy silence fell over the boardroom. Victoria's smug expression had faded, replaced by a look of barely contained fury. Richard Hawthorne cleared his throat. "Well, this is certainly a lot to consider. I think we need some time to discuss and deliberate. Michael, Ms. Davis, if you could step outside for a few minutes." As they left the boardroom, Michael felt a mix of hope and anxiety churning in his stomach. They had made their case as best they could, but would it be enough? In the hallway, Samantha turned to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Michael, whatever happens in there, I want you to know how proud I am of you. The way you stood up for Sunnyside, for our community, it was incredible." Michael felt a lump form in his throat. "Samantha, But before he could finish, the boardroom doors opened. Richard Hawthorne stood there, his expression unreadable. "We're ready for you," he said simply. As they re-entered the room, Michael's heart was pounding. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, not just the fate of Sunnyside, but his own future, his relationship with Samantha, everything hanging in the balance. Richard took his place at the head of the table, his gaze sweeping across the room before settling on Michael and Samantha. After careful consideration, he began, his voice measured. "The board has reached a decision. We believe that the Sunnyside Community Development Project, as presented by Mr. Johnson and Miss Davis, represents a unique opportunity for Lancaster Consortium to demonstrate corporate social responsibility while also pursuing innovative avenues for growth." Michael felt a surge of hope, but he held his breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "However," Richard continued, "we also recognize the validity of some of Ms. Sinclair's concerns, particularly regarding the financial risks involved." Victoria's triumphant smile began to return, but Richard wasn't finished. "Therefore, we propose a compromise. Lancaster Consortium will move forward with the Sunnyside project, but with some modifications. We will implement a phased approach, starting with renovations to the existing community center and gradually expanding services as we assess the project's impact and viability." Michael and Samantha exchanged a look of cautious optimism. It wasn't everything they had hoped for, but it was a start, a chance to prove the value of their vision. "Furthermore," Richard added, "we will establish a community advisory board to oversee the project, ensuring that the needs of Sunnyside residents are always at the forefront of our decisions. Miss Davis, we would like you to head this advisory board, working in close partnership with Mr. Johnson and Lancaster Consortium." Samantha's eyes widened in surprise and gratitude. Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. I would be honored." As the meeting adjourned, with board members filing out and Victoria storming off in barely contained rage, Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders. They had done it. Sunnyside was safe, at least for now. But as he turned to Samantha, ready to celebrate their victory, he saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a mix of joy and sadness that he couldn't quite decipher. "Samantha, what's wrong?" he asked, concern creeping into his voice. She shook her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "Nothing's wrong, Michael. We did it. We saved Sunnyside. It's just what?" Samantha took a deep breath, meeting his gaze steadily. "I'm so proud of what we've accomplished, of the man you've become. But your grandfather's deadline, it's tomorrow, isn't it?" Michael felt his heart sink as reality came crashing back. In the heat of the battle for Sunnyside, he had almost forgotten about his grandfather's ultimatum. He had less than 24 hours to fulfill the conditions of the will, to find true love and marry, or risk losing everything. As he stood there in the emptying boardroom, caught between the triumph of saving Sunnyside and the looming deadline that could change everything, Michael realized that the greatest challenge of all still lay ahead. How could he reconcile his growing feelings for Samantha, his commitment to Sunnyside, and the seemingly impossible demands of his grandfather's will? The clock was ticking, and Michael Johnson had one day left to make the most important decision of his life. The sun was setting over Miami, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink as Michael and Samantha left the Lancaster Consortium building. The city pulsed with its usual evening energy, but for Michael, everything seemed muted, overshadowed by the weight of the decision looming before him. "We should celebrate," Samantha said, her voice cutting through his thoughts. "What we accomplished today. It's huge, Michael. We saved Sunnyside." Michael managed a smile, trying to push aside his inner turmoil. "You're right. We did it. Thanks to you, Samantha, your passion, your dedication. You're the real hero here." Samantha shook her head, a soft smile playing at her lips. "We did it together, Michael. You've changed so much in the past week. The way you stood up to Victoria, how you've embraced Sunnyside's mission. I'm proud of you." Her words, meant to be comforting, only intensified the conflict raging within Michael. How could he explain the impossible choice he now faced? How could he tell her that in less than 24 hours, he might lose everything he'd worked for, everything he'd come to believe in? "Samantha," he began, his voice heavy with emotion, "there's something we need to talk about. My grandfather's ultimatum." But before he could continue, they were interrupted by a commotion nearby. A group of people were gathered around a street performer, an elderly man playing a battered guitar with surprising skill. The melody that drifted towards them was hauntingly beautiful, filled with a longing that seemed to mirror Michael's own conflicted heart. Samantha's eyes lit up. "Oh, Michael, listen. It's beautiful. Can we stay for a moment?" Unable to resist the plea in her eyes, Michael nodded. They made their way closer to the performer, joining the small crowd. As they listened, Michael found himself studying Samantha's profile, illuminated by the fading sunlight. The way her eyes closed as she swayed gently to the music, the soft smile playing at her lips, he was struck anew by how much she had come to mean to him in such a short time. As the song came to an end, Samantha turned to him, her eyes shining. "That was incredible. You know, my father used to play guitar. He always said that music had the power to heal, to bring people together. Listening to that, it reminded me of why I fell in love with community work in the first place. It's about connection, about creating moments of beauty and meaning in people's lives." Michael felt a lump form in his throat. Here was Samantha, opening up to him, sharing a piece of her past, and all he could think about was the ticking clock hanging over his head. He knew he had to tell her the truth, to explain the full extent of his grandfather's conditions, but the words seemed stuck in his throat. "Samantha," he tried again, "about my grandfather's will." But once more, fate seemed to intervene. A group of children from Sunnyside's after-school program spotted them, rushing over with excited shouts. "Mr. Johnson, Miss Davis," they called out. "We heard the news. Is it true? Did you really save Sunnyside?" Samantha laughed, kneeling down to greet the children. "We sure did," she said, her voice warm with affection. "And it's all thanks to brave, wonderful people like you who showed everyone how special Sunnyside is." As Michael watched Samantha interact with the children, his heart swelled with a mixture of love and despair. This was the woman he had fallen for, kind, passionate, dedicated to making the world a better place. How could he possibly risk losing her, losing everything they'd built together for the sake of his inheritance? But the alternative seemed equally impossible. If he failed to meet his grandfather's conditions, he would lose his position at Lancaster Consortium, his ability to protect Sunnyside, everything he'd worked for his entire life. And what would Samantha think of him then? Would she still look at him with that warmth, that pride, if he was no longer able to help her cause? As the children said their goodbyes and ran off, giggling and chattering excitedly, Samantha turned back to Michael. "Sorry about that," she said, her eyes still bright with joy. "You were saying something about your grandfather's will." Michael took a deep breath, steeling himself for the conversation he knew they needed to have. "Samantha, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have explained fully from the beginning." He gestured to a nearby bench, and they sat down. The street around them continued to buzz with activity, but Michael felt as if they were in a bubble, separated from the rest of the world. "My grandfather's ultimatum," he began, his voice low and intense. "It's not just about finding love. There's more to it. To inherit, to keep my position at Lancaster Consortium, I have to be married by midnight tomorrow." Samantha's eyes widened in shock. "Married? But that's impossible. We've only known each other for a week." Michael nodded, feeling the weight of his grandfather's expectations pressing down on him. "I know. It's crazy. It's unfair. But that's the condition. If I don't meet it, I lose everything. My job, my inheritance, my ability to protect Sunnyside." He trailed off, watching as a myriad of emotions played across Samantha's face. Surprise, confusion, hurt, and something else he couldn't quite identify. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael ran a hand through his hair, frustration and regret coloring his words. "I should have. I know I should have. At first, I was so focused on finding a way out of it, on beating the system somehow. And then I met you, and Sunnyside became so important. And I didn't want to complicate things. I didn't want you to think that my feelings for you, my commitment to Sunnyside, was just about fulfilling some arbitrary condition." Samantha was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. When she finally spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Michael, I don't know what to say. This is all so much to take in. A week ago, you were a stranger, a businessman looking to tear down our community center. And now, Michael prompted gently, his heart racing. Samantha met his gaze, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "And now you're someone I care about deeply, someone who's shown incredible growth, who's fought alongside us, who's become a part of our Sunnyside family. But marriage, that's a huge step, one I'm not sure I'm ready for, no matter how I feel about you." Michael felt his heart sink, even as he understood her hesitation. "I know," he said softly. "I'm not asking you to marry me, Samantha. I would never put that kind of pressure on you. I needed you to know the whole truth, to understand what I'm facing." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over them. The street performer had started another song, a melancholy tune that seemed to perfectly capture the bittersweet tension of the moment. Finally, Samantha spoke, her voice quiet but firm. "So, what are you going to do?" Michael shook his head, feeling more lost than he ever had in his life. "I don't know. Part of me wants to tell my grandfather to keep his money, to forge my own path, but if I do that, I lose my position at Lancaster Consortium. I lose the ability to protect Sunnyside, to make the changes we've fought so hard for." He turned to her, his eyes pleading for understanding. "Samantha, I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. This past week has changed me in ways I never thought possible. But I can't ask you to make a decision like this, not with so little time, not with so much at stake." Samantha reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Michael, I can't pretend to understand everything you're going through, but I want you to know that no matter what happens, what you've done for Sunnyside, for our community, it matters. It's real, and my feelings for you are real too, even if I'm not ready for marriage." As they sat there, hands intertwined, the Miami night settling around them, Michael felt a mix of emotions he couldn't begin to untangle. Love for Samantha, gratitude for her understanding, fear of the choice that lay before him, and a deep, gnawing uncertainty about what the future held. The clock was ticking, the deadline drawing ever closer. In less than 24 hours, Michael Johnson would have to make a decision that would shape the rest of his life. Would he choose love and risk losing everything he'd worked for? Or would he find another way to fulfill his grandfather's conditions, potentially sacrificing the connection he'd found with Samantha and the Sunnyside community? As the street performer's song faded away and the bustling city life continued around them, Michael and Samantha sat in silence, both acutely aware that their story was far from over. The final chapter was yet to be written, and the pen was in Michael's hand. The Miami skyline glittered against the night sky as Michael's car wound its way through the city streets. The victory at the board meeting and the bittersweet conversation with Samantha had left him emotionally drained. As he drove, his mind raced with the impossible decision that lay before him. He found himself heading towards Sunnyside, drawn to the place that had become the center of his world in just a week. The community center was dark and quiet at this late hour, but Michael pulled into the small parking lot anyway. He sat in his car for a long moment, staring at the weathered brick building that had come to mean so much to him. With a deep sigh, Michael got out of the car and walked towards the center. He wasn't sure what he was looking for: answers, inspiration, or maybe just a connection to the community that had changed his life. As he approached the main entrance, he noticed a faint light coming from one of the side windows. Curious, he made his way around the building. To his surprise, he found Mrs. Henderson, the elderly woman who seemed to be the heart and soul of Sunnyside, sitting on a bench in the small community garden. She was illuminated by a single porch light, her hands busy with knitting needles. "Mrs. Henderson," Michael called out softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, a warm smile spreading across her face as she recognized him. "Michael, dear, what brings you here at this hour? Come, sit with me for a spell." Grateful for the company and the distraction from his tumultuous thoughts, Michael joined her on the bench. The night air was warm and fragrant with the scent of blooming jasmine from the garden. "I couldn't sleep," Michael admitted. "There's a lot on my mind." Mrs. Henderson nodded sagely, her knitting needles clicking softly as she worked. "I imagine there is, after the day you've had. Samantha told me about the board meeting. You did a wonderful thing for Sunnyside today, Michael." Michael felt a lump form in his throat at her words. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson. But I'm afraid I might not be able to keep helping Sunnyside after tomorrow." The old woman's hands stilled, and she turned to look at him, her eyes sharp and perceptive. "Does this have something to do with that ultimatum of yours? The one about getting married?" Michael's eyes widened in surprise. "How did you know about that?" Mrs. Henderson chuckled softly. "Oh, my dear, I may be old, but my ears work just fine. I overheard you and Samantha talking about it the other day. Don't worry," she added, seeing the concern on Michael's face. "Your secret's safe with me." Michael relaxed slightly, feeling an odd sense of relief at being able to discuss his dilemma openly. "I don't know what to do, Mrs. Henderson. If I don't get married by midnight tomorrow, I'll lose everything. My job, my inheritance, my ability to help Sunnyside. But I can't ask Samantha to marry me. Not like this. It wouldn't be fair to her." Mrs. Henderson was quiet for a moment, her knitting needles resuming their rhythmic movement. When she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. "Michael, let me ask you something. When you think about losing everything, what scares you the most?" Michael considered her question carefully. A week ago, the answer would have been simple: losing his wealth, his status, his carefully built career. "But now, I'm afraid of letting people down," he admitted softly. "Sunnyside, the community here, Samantha. I'm afraid of not being able to help anymore, of losing the sense of purpose I've found here." Mrs. Henderson nodded, a knowing smile on her face. "And that, my dear, is how I know you'll make the right decision, whatever it may be. The Michael Johnson who first came to Sunnyside wouldn't have cared about letting us down. He would have only been concerned with his own loss." Her words struck a chord deep within Michael. She was right. He had changed, profoundly and irrevocably. in the short time he'd known Sunnyside and Samantha. "But how do I choose?" he asked, the anguish clear in his voice. "If I give up my inheritance, I lose the ability to help Sunnyside in the ways I've promised. But if I try to fulfill my grandfather's conditions, I might lose Samantha and the trust of this community." Mrs. Henderson set her knitting aside and took Michael's hand in her weathered one. "Michael, let me tell you a story. When I was a young woman, not much older than Samantha, I faced a choice of my own. I was engaged to a wealthy man, someone my parents approved of, someone who could give me a life of comfort and security. But there was another man, a teacher at the local school. He didn't have much money, but he had a passion for education and a dream of making a difference in children's lives." She paused, her eyes distant with memory. "I chose the teacher. My parents were furious. My friends thought I was crazy. We struggled financially for years. But you know what? I never regretted it for a moment, because I was part of something meaningful, something bigger than myself." Michael listened intently, feeling the weight of her words. "What are you saying, Mrs. Henderson?" She squeezed his hand gently. "I'm saying that sometimes, when we let go of what we think we need, we make room for something far more valuable. You found something special here at Sunnyside, Michael. Something that money can't buy and no inheritance can replace." As her words sank in, Michael felt a sense of clarity beginning to emerge from the chaos of his thoughts. He thought about the past week, the joy he'd felt working alongside Samantha, the sense of purpose he'd discovered in fighting for Sunnyside, the connections he'd made with the community. "But what about the promises I've made?" he asked. "The plans for expanding Sunnyside, the support I've pledged." Mrs. Henderson's eyes twinkled with mischief. "Oh, I think you'll find that there's more than one way to keep a promise, Michael. You're a clever man with a good heart. If you truly want to help Sunnyside, you'll find a way, with or without your grandfather's money." As they sat there in the quiet garden, the distant sounds of the city a faint backdrop to their conversation, Michael felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. The path forward was still uncertain, but for the first time since receiving his grandfather's letter, he felt a sense of peace about the decision he faced. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson," he said softly. "And I think I know what I need to do now." The old woman patted his hand affectionately. "You're a good man, Michael Johnson. Whatever you decide, know that you'll always have a home here at Sunnyside." As Michael stood to leave, feeling a renewed sense of purpose, Mrs. Henderson called out to him, "Oh, and Michael, don't forget to follow your heart. It led you to Sunnyside for a reason." With those words echoing in his mind, Michael made his way back to his car. The night was still young, and he had much to do before the deadline. As he drove away from Sunnyside, his heart felt lighter than it had in days. He knew now that whatever happened with his inheritance, whatever challenges lay ahead, he had found something far more valuable in the past week. A community, a purpose, and a love that transcended wealth and status. The final hours were ticking away, but Michael Johnson was no longer afraid. He was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the wisdom of Mrs. Henderson and the strength he'd discovered within himself at Sunnyside. As the Miami night enveloped him, Michael set out to write the final chapter of this unexpected journey, one that would redefine his life, his values, and his understanding of true wealth. The first rays of sunlight were just beginning to paint the Miami skyline as Michael Johnson stood in his penthouse apartment, gazing out at the awakening city. He had spent most of the night poring over documents, making phone calls, and formulating a plan. The deadline set by his grandfather's will loomed just hours away, but for the first time since this whirlwind journey began, Michael felt a sense of calm purpose. His conversation with Mrs. Henderson had crystallized something within him, helping him to see clearly what truly mattered. The Michael Johnson who had received that fateful letter a week ago was gone, replaced by a man who understood the true value of community, purpose, and love. With a deep breath, Michael picked up his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. After a few rings, a gruff voice answered, "Johnson here." "Uncle Robert," Michael said, his voice steady, "would I need your help?" Robert Johnson, his father's younger brother and a savvy business lawyer, had always been something of a black sheep in the family. He had chosen to pursue public interest law rather than join the family business, a decision that had strained his relationship with Michael's grandfather. But it was precisely this independent streak that Michael was counting on now. "Michael, it's barely dawn. What's this about?" "It's about grandfather's will," Michael replied, "and about doing the right thing." For the next hour, Michael outlined his plan to his uncle, explaining everything that had happened over the past week. Sunnyside, Samantha, the transformation he had undergone. Robert listened in silence, only occasionally asking for clarification. "You understand what you're risking, don't you?" Robert asked when Michael had finished. "And if you go through with this, you could lose everything." Michael's grip tightened on the phone. "I know, but I've realized that everything isn't what I thought it was. Will you help me, Uncle Robert?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Finally, Robert spoke, a note of pride in his voice. "I always hoped you'd find your way, Michael. I'll do what I can. Meet me at my office in an hour." As Michael hung up, he felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. The first piece of his plan was in motion. Now for the most difficult part. He dialed another number, his heart racing as it rang. "Hello?" Samantha's voice was groggy with sleep. "Samantha, it's Michael. I'm sorry to wake you, but I need to see you. Can you meet me at Sunnyside in an hour? There's something important I need to tell you." There was a pause, and Michael could almost feel Samantha's concern through the phone. "Of course," she said finally. "Is everything okay?" Michael smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest at the sound of her voice. "It will be. I'll explain everything when I see you." As he ended the call, Michael took one last look around his luxurious apartment. The trappings of wealth that had once seemed so important now felt hollow in comparison to the richness he had found at Sunnyside. Whatever happened today, he knew he would never see this place, or his life, the same way again. An hour later, Michael stood outside Sunnyside Community Center, watching as Samantha approached. Even in the early morning light, with her hair hastily pulled back and worry etched on her face, she was the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. "And Michael," she said as she reached him, her eyes searching his face, "what's going on? Have you made a decision about your grandfather's ultimatum?" He nodded, taking her hands in his. "I have, but before I tell you, I need you to know something. Samantha, this past week has changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. You've opened my eyes to what really matters, to the kind of man I want to be. Whatever happens next, I want you to know that my feelings for you are real, more real than anything I've ever felt." Samantha's eyes widened, a mix of emotions playing across her face. "Michael, But he gently placed a finger on her lips, silencing her. "Please, let me finish. I'm not going to ask you to marry me, Samantha. I know that would be unfair to you, to us. What we have, what we're building, it deserves time to grow naturally." He took a deep breath, steeling himself for what came next. "I've decided to give up my inheritance." Samantha gasped, her grip on his hands tightening. "But Michael, what about Lancaster Consortium? What about all the plans we made for Sunnyside?" Michael smiled, feeling a sense of lightness he hadn't experienced in years. "That's what I wanted to show you. Come with me." He led her into the community center, where to Samantha's surprise, they found Uncle Robert waiting, along with Richard Hawthorne and Janet Lee from the Lancaster Consortium board. "What's going on?" Samantha asked, looking between the assembled group in confusion. Michael turned to face her, his eyes shining with determination. "I'm transferring my shares in Lancaster Consortium to a newly formed community trust. This trust will be dedicated to supporting and expanding programs like Sunnyside across Miami. Uncle Robert has agreed to oversee the legal aspects, and Richard and Janet have pledged their support to ensure the board honors our commitment to community development." Samantha's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Michael, I don't know what to say. This is incredible. But what about you? Your career, your future. Michael took her hands in his once more. "My future is right here, Samantha. If you'll have me, I want to work alongside you to build something meaningful together. I may not have my grandfather's money anymore, but I have something far more valuable, a purpose, a community, and love." The last word hung in the air between them, charged with possibility. Samantha looked into Michael's eyes, seeing the sincerity, the hope, the love reflected there. Slowly, a smile spread across her face, bright as the Miami sun. "Oh, Michael," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Of course I'll have you. We'll build this future together." As they embraced, the small group around them broke into applause. Mrs. Henderson, who had silently entered during their exchange, wiped a tear from her eye. "I told you you'd find a way, Michael," she said, her voice warm with pride. The next few hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. Papers were signed, plans were made, and the future of Sunnyside and Michael and Samantha's relationship began to take shape. As the deadline set by his grandfather's will came and went, Michael felt no regret, only a sense of excitement for the journey ahead. As the sun began to set on this transformative day, Michael and Samantha stood in the Sunnyside Community Garden, surrounded by the people who had become their family over the past week. The air was filled with laughter, music, and the tantalizing aroma of a community potluck dinner. Michael looked around at the scene before him. Jake, teaching a group of younger kids how to plant tomatoes. Mrs. Henderson regaling a group of seniors with stories from her youth. Richard Hawthorne, awkwardly but enthusiastically, joining in a game of basketball with some of the teenagers. "You know," Samantha said, leaning into him, "I think your grandfather would be proud of you. This is a pretty amazing legacy you're building." Michael smiled, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Our legacy," he corrected gently. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Samantha. You showed me what really matters in life." As they stood there, watching the community they had fought so hard to protect thriving around them, Michael felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had lost an inheritance, yes, but he had gained something far more precious. A love that had transformed him, a purpose that fulfilled him, and a community that had embraced him. The journey that had begun with a shocking ultimatum had led him to a place he never could have imagined. And as he looked at Samantha, saw the love and pride shining in her eyes, Michael knew that this was only the beginning of their story. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. As darkness fell, the garden lights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the gathering. Michael and Samantha joined their newfound family, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. Together, the warm Miami sun peeked through the curtains of Michael Johnson's modest apartment, a far cry from the luxurious penthouse he had called home just a month ago. As he stirred awake, a smile played on his lips, not because of any material comfort, but because of the profound sense of purpose and contentment that had become his constant companion. It had been 4 weeks since he had made the decision to give up his inheritance and dedicate himself to Sunnyside and the community that had changed his life. 4 weeks of challenges, adjustments, and unexpected joys. As he got ready for the day ahead, Michael reflected on the whirlwind of events that had followed his choice. The news of his decision had sent shockwaves through Miami's business community. Some called him foolish, others praised his altruism, but Michael remained steadfast in his conviction. The newly formed Sunnyside Community Trust, overseen by Uncle Robert and supported by the reformed board of Lancaster Consortium, was already making waves in the world of community development. As he left his apartment and began the short walk to Sunnyside Community Center, Michael couldn't help but notice the small changes taking place in the neighborhood. Fresh coats of paint adorned some of the buildings, new flower beds bloomed on street corners, and there was a palpable sense of hope and energy in the air. Approaching the community center, Michael's heart swelled with pride. The old building had undergone a transformation of its own. While still modest, it now sported a new roof, repaired windows, and a vibrant mural on one wall depicting the diverse faces of the Sunnyside community. "Morning, Mr. Johnson," called out Jake, who was busy setting up a new computer in the center's expanding tech lab. The teenager's enthusiasm was infectious, and Michael marveled at how much Jake had grown in confidence over the past month. "Good morning, Jake," Michael replied warmly. "How's the new equipment coming along?" Jake's eyes lit up. "It's amazing, Mr. Johnson. With these computers, we can start that coding class we've been talking about. I've already got a list of kids eager to learn." Michael nodded approvingly, feeling a surge of satisfaction. This was what it was all about: creating opportunities, nurturing potential, building a stronger community. As he made his way through the center, greeting volunteers and community members, Michael found himself outside Samantha's office. Through the open door, he could see her engrossed in conversation with Mrs. Henderson, their heads bent over what looked like building plans. Samantha looked up, her face breaking into a radiant smile as she saw Michael. "Perfect timing," she said, waving him in. "We could use your input on this." Michael entered the office, planting a quick kiss on Samantha's cheek before turning his attention to the plans spread out on her desk. "What are we looking at?" Mrs. Henderson's eyes twinkled with excitement. "We're discussing the possibility of expanding Sunnyside to include a small health clinic," she explained. "There's a vacant lot next door that would be perfect, and goodness knows our community could use better access to healthcare." Michael studied the plans, his mind already racing with possibilities. "This is a great idea," he said enthusiastically. "We could partner with local medical schools, offer internships. It would benefit the community and provide valuable experience for aspiring healthcare professionals." Samantha beamed at him, and Michael felt that now familiar flutter in his heart. Their relationship had deepened over the past month, growing stronger with each challenge they faced together. They were partners in every sense of the word, their shared passion for Sunnyside and each other creating a bond that Michael treasured above all else. As they continued to discuss the clinic plans, Michael's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He excused himself, stepping out into the hallway to answer it. "Michael Johnson speaking." "Mr. Johnson, this is Harold Finch, your grandfather's lawyer." Michael felt a momentary tightening in his chest. He hadn't heard from Mr. Finch since the day he had officially renounced his inheritance. "Mr. Finch, what can I do for you?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Mr. Johnson, I'm calling because there's been an unexpected development regarding your grandfather's will. Would you be available to meet with me this afternoon?" Michael's mind raced with possibilities. Had there been a mistake? Was there some legal complication he hadn't foreseen? "Of course, Mr. Finch. Shall I come to your office?" "Actually," Mr. Finch replied, "I was hoping I could come to you, to Sunnyside Community Center, if that's agreeable. There's something I need to see for myself." Intrigued and slightly apprehensive, Michael agreed to the meeting. As he ended the call and rejoined Samantha and Mrs. Henderson, he couldn't shake the feeling that another twist in his journey was about to unfold. The day passed in a blur of activity. Michael threw himself into his work, helping to organize a job fair for local residents, sitting in on a meeting about expanding the center's educational programs, and even rolling up his sleeves to help repaint the children's playroom. Throughout it all, the impending meeting with Mr. Finch lurked in the back of his mind. As the afternoon sun began to slant through the windows, Michael saw a sleek black car pull up outside the center. Mr. Finch, a distinguished-looking man in his 60s, emerged, his eyes taking in the bustling activity around Sunnyside with evident curiosity. Michael met him at the door, extending his hand in greeting. "Mr. Finch, welcome to Sunnyside." The lawyer shook his hand firmly, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Mr. Johnson, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I must say, this is not at all what I expected." As Michael led Mr. Finch on a tour of the center, he couldn't help but notice the older man's reactions. There was surprise in his eyes as he watched a group of seniors engaged in a lively debate club, admiration as he observed teenagers tutoring younger children, and something close to wonder as he listened to Samantha passionately outline their plans for the future. Finally, they settled in Michael's small office, a far cry from his former executive suite, but filled with drawings from the center's children and photos of community events. "Mr. Johnson," Mr. Finch began, his tone serious. "I've been your grandfather's lawyer for over 30 years. In that time, I've seen him make many business decisions, some brilliant, some less so. But I've never seen him as conflicted as he was when he added that final clause to his will." Michael leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Mr. Finch sighed, removing his glasses to polish them thoughtfully. "Your grandfather was a complicated man, Michael. He built an empire, yes, but towards the end of his life, I sensed a growing dissatisfaction. He worried that in pursuing wealth and success, he had lost sight of what truly mattered." The lawyer reached into his briefcase, pulling out a sealed envelope. "He left this with me, with instructions to deliver it to you 1 month after the deadline in his will, regardless of the outcome. I believe he wanted to see what choice you would make, without the influence of this letter." With slightly shaking hands, Michael accepted the envelope. As he broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside, he recognized his grandfather's bold handwriting. "My dear Michael, if you're reading this, a month has passed since the deadline I set for you. I want you to know that the conditions in my will were never about the money or the company. They were about love, purpose, and the kind of man you would choose to be. I built Lancaster Consortium from nothing, and for many years I believed that financial success was the ultimate measure of a man's worth. But as I near the end of my life, I've come to realize how empty that belief is. The ultimatum I gave you was a test, Michael, not a test to see if you could find a wife or secure the inheritance, but a test of your character. I wanted to see if you would choose love and purpose over wealth and status. I don't know what choice you made, but I hope it was one that has brought you happiness and fulfillment. If you've found love, real love, not just a marriage of convenience, then you are truly wealthy. If you found a purpose greater than yourself, then you have succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. Whatever you decided, know that I am proud of you. The Michael Johnson reading this letter is, I hope, a man who understands what really matters in life. With all my love, your grandfather P.S. Mr. Finch has instructions to reinstate your inheritance if, in his judgment, you have found true love and purpose. The money was never the point, my boy. It was always about the man you would become. As Michael finished reading, he looked up to find Mr. Finch watching him intently. Your grandfather was a shrewd judge of character, Mr. Johnson, the lawyer said softly. And based on what I've seen here today, I believe he would be very proud of the man you've become. Michael felt a lump form in his throat, overwhelmed by the emotions surging through him. Mr. Finch, he said, his voice thick, the inheritance, it doesn't matter anymore. What I've found here at Sunnyside, with Samantha and this community, it's worth more than any amount of money. Mr. Finch nodded, a genuine smile spreading across his face. I thought you might say that, which is precisely why, in accordance with your grandfather's wishes, I am here to inform you that your inheritance has been reinstated, with the stipulation, of course, that a significant portion be used to further the work you're doing here at Sunnyside and in other communities like it. Michael sat back, stunned. The implications of what Mr. Finch was saying began to sink in. With the resources of his inheritance, combined with the support of Lancaster Consortium, they could expand their work beyond Sunnyside, touching countless lives across Miami and beyond. As if on cue, there was a knock at the office door. Samantha poked her head in, her eyes bright with excitement. Michael, sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this. In a daze, Michael followed Samantha out into the main area of the center. Mr. Finch trailing behind them. The room was packed with community members, all gathered around a small television set. On the screen, a news anchor was mid-report. In a surprising turn of events, the Sunnyside Community Development Model, spearheaded by former Lancaster Consortium CEO Michael Johnson, has been selected as a pilot program for urban renewal by the state government. This innovative approach to community-driven development is being hailed as a potential game changer in addressing urban poverty and revitalizing struggling neighborhoods. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Michael felt Samantha's hand slip into his, squeezing tightly. As he looked around at the jubilant faces of the Sunnyside community, Mrs. Henderson wiping away happy tears, Jake pumping his fist in the air, children dancing with joy, Michael felt a profound sense of rightness wash over him. This was what his grandfather had wanted for him. Not just success, but significance. Not just wealth, but purpose. And in Samantha, he had found a partner who shared his vision and his heart. As the celebration continued around them, Michael turned to Samantha, cupping her face gently in his hands. "I love you," he said simply, pouring every ounce of emotion into those 3 words. Samantha's eyes shimmered with tears of joy. "I love you too, Michael, more than I ever thought possible." As their lips met in a tender kiss, the cheers of the Sunnyside community faded into the background. In that moment, Michael knew with absolute certainty that he had found his true inheritance, a love that transformed him, a purpose that fulfilled him, and a community that had become his family. The journey that had begun with a shocking ultimatum had led him to a place of profound happiness and meaning. And as he held Samantha close, surrounded by the warmth and joy of Sunnyside, Michael Johnson knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. The sun began to set on Miami, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. But inside Sunnyside Community Center, a new day was dawning. A day full of promise, purpose, and the unshakable power of love and community. As the celebration continued late into the night, Michael and Samantha slipped away to the rooftop garden. Standing under the stars, they looked out over the neighborhood they had fought so hard to protect and nurture. "What do you think happens next?" Samantha asked, her voice soft with wonder. Michael smiled, pulling her close. "I don't know exactly," he admitted, "but I do know one thing. Whatever comes our way, we'll face it together. You, me, and the amazing family we've found here at Sunnyside." As they sealed this promise with a kiss, the Miami skyline glittered before them, a reminder of the world of possibilities that awaited. The story of Michael Johnson and Samantha Davis, of Sunnyside and its resilient community, was far from over. In fact, it was clear that the most exciting chapters were yet to be written. And so, under a canopy of stars, with the warmth of love and the strength of community surrounding them, Michael and Samantha embraced their new beginning, ready to write the next chapter of their extraordinary journey together. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.